like to call the meeting to order, please. Everybody take their seats. We could stand for a moment of silence and pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, Madam Secretary, can we have the roll call, please?
Jamie Girardi,
Here.
Don Anderson,
Here.
Peter Hansel,
Here.
Roberto Size,
Here.
Chris Poole,
Here.
Chris Williams,
Here.
Chairman Charles Gray.
Here. And proof of publication, please.
The items were advertised in the Tampa Bay Times on January 5th, 2022, January 19th, 2022, and February 16th, 2022, and by affidavit of certified mailings and site postings.
All right, thank you very much. I think we have minutes to approve.
Motion to approve the minutes from the February 3rd, 2022 meeting.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the motion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Okay, so I'd like to welcome everybody today to the Planning Commission. We are appointed by the County Commissioners and we meet twice monthly. We serve as a local planning agency and we hold public hearings and transmit to the Board of County Commissioners recommendations on comprehensive plan amendments, land development code amendments, rezonings, and conditional use amendments requests. The Planning Commission is the final decision-making body for certain appeals, variance requests, and certain alternative standard requests and special exceptions. However, final appeals may be made to the Board of County Commissioners. Anyone who's in opposition to any comprehensive plan amendment, land development code amendment, rezoning, conditional use, or any item where the Planning Commission transmits a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners, it's important for you to attend the appropriate Board of County Commissioner meeting. For those of you not familiar with our procedures, I'll explain those briefly. We have 3 sections. We have continuances, we have consent, and we have regular items. We have continuances are items where the staff or the applicant has requested a continuance for any number of reasons. It's in our tradition to approve those requests unless there are extenuating circumstances. And then we have consent items. Those are items that have not been objected to by staff or by the public. Those items will be on continuance. We'll read those one at a time. If there's something on consent that you would like to have discussed today, raise your hand when when it's read off, and we'll pull it from consent. And it'll go on the regular agenda. And those are the items that are on the agenda to be heard and have people give testimony, both pro and con. Applicants will have 3 minutes to make their presentation. People with questions or objections will have 3 minutes to ask their questions, and then the applicants will have time to respond. In some cases, we've requested written request for additional time beyond the normal 5-minute response, and I think we have a couple of those, if I'm not mistaken. So this is a good time. If you haven't done so, to put your phones on the silent position. Better check my own. And before we start the regular meeting, is anybody here to speak about any topic that is not on today's agenda? Okay, I don't see anyone. So I guess we can start, Denise. And let me just say that before we get started, so that anyone who's interested will know, we're going to switch some of these items around. We're going to put the ones that are going to probably require more time at the end. So we're going to move PC 6 to the end, We're gonna move, Cross Park, to be right after P7. And then, P8, and then P6.
So to repeat that, the new order would be P7,
Yeah,
P9,
yeah,
P8, and P6.
correct.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So Denise, I guess we're ready to roll?
Yep, we are ready. Wow, that's
Okay.
really loud. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Planning Commission members. Denise Hernandez, Planning and Development. We're going to start with PC2, which is PDD 227599. This is a special exception for Weissmith Properties LLC for a freestanding recreational vehicle and boat storage in an I-1 light industrial park district. Comes to you with a recommendation of approval with conditions, and I did send a correction to the Planning Commission members and to the Clerk of Courts, modifying one of the findings of fact, number 10, because at the time that the agenda was published, we had not received comments from the City of Port Richey. And since that time we did, they're just regular comments that they want to see the item when the site plan comes in, and that's regular within our interlocal agreement. So
Okay.
just wanted to state that for the record.
Thank you.
Recommendation is approval with conditions.
Okay. Is the applicant present? Okay, anyone here to object? Okay.
Moving
Next.
on to the next item, item PC3, you're sitting as the local planning agency on this item, PDD 220244. It's a small-scale comprehensive plan amendments, CPAS, correction, 2202. Softwin, it's providing for a small-scale comprehensive plan amendment to the future land use map, map 2-15 and sheet 04 from Res 1, residential 1 dwelling unit per gross acre, to IH, industrial heavy, and it's on approximately 8.86 acres of real property located on the west side of Softwin Lane, approximately 0.39 miles north of Hudson Avenue. We're asking that you find the proposed amendment consistent with the Pasco County Comprehensive Plan and recommend approval to the Board of County Commissioners.
All right, is the applicant present? Anyone here to object?
Mr. Chairman, I do have a couple questions on that.
Okay, so they'd like to pull that one, PC3.
Mr. Chair, in terms of order, would you like to do that one right before P7?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. Following item is PC4, PDD 220249. It's a small-scale comprehensive plan amendment, CPAS 2204, Old Lakeland Highway Industrial, for a small-scale comprehensive plan amendment to the future land use map, map 2-15 and sheet 16. It's from Res 1, residential 1 dwelling unit per gross acre, to IL, industrial light, and on approximately 21 acres of real property. This is actually, yeah, that's good. Real property located to the west of Old Lakeland Highway, north of Townsend Road, and approximately 3/4 of a mile east of US Highway 98. We're asking that you find the proposed amendment consistent with the Pasco County Comprehensive Plan and recommend approval to the Board of County Commissioners.
All right, the applicant present? All right, is there anyone here to object? Okay, see no objections. Go ahead.
Following item is PC5, PDD 220029. It's a large-scale comprehensive plan amendment, CPAL 2123, for Northridge. This is providing for a large-scale comprehensive plan amendment to the future land use map 2-15 and sheet 04, changing from Res 1, residential 1 dwelling unit per gross acre, to PD, plan development on approximately 178.13 acres of real property located at the south side of County Line Road. A text amendment creating sub-area policy 7.1.65 North Ridge, and a map amendment to the future land use map 2-9, adding sub-area map 2-965 North Ridge. Comes through with a recommendation for you to find the proposed amendment consistent with the Pasco County Comprehensive Plan and recommend approval to the Board of County Commissioners.
Okay, is the applicant present? Anyone here to object? Okay,
And that is the end of the consent agenda.
all right. So do I hear a motion to approve the consent agenda as modified?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion to approve the consent agenda as modified. Do we have a second? Any further discussion of the motion? Signify by saying aye if you're for.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Okay, that motion carries.
I'm not sure whose item Soft Wind is. Do you want us to do a presentation, or do you have specific questions that one of our planners can answer?
So just because it's close to our school sites there, but of course there's a lot of things out there, I'm not overly concerned, but it looks like it's a fertilizer plant of some kind.
It
So I
is.
just
What's
wanna
going to happen?
ask-
Yes,
Want to
absolutely.
ask about noise and/or odors or fumes, et cetera.
Yeah, so what's happening is there's going to be a companion rezoning and conditional use to I-2, and a conditional use for fertilizer manufacturing. Certainly, conditional uses may be conditioned, so we will work with the district school board, among other stakeholders out there when that comes in. Do you want to add anything?
Amy Heiler with Long Range Planning. This is just the comprehensive plan amendment. So when we take into consideration the future land use change, such as this, we just want to make sure it's compatible with at least the surrounding flu areas. In this scenario, it is, but like Denise said, we can work with conditioning the conditional use for the fertilizer if necessary.
All right, thank you, Amy.
Thank you. Barbara Wilhite, 6327 Grand Boulevard, Newport Beach, Florida, for the applicant.
Okay,
We
hold
will-
just a minute, Barbara.
Yes.
I don't think we've sworn anybody
Oh,
from the
okay.
public, so let's go ahead and do that. If anybody who's going to give testimony today, if you could stand and raise your right hand. Okay, go ahead.
I do. Mr. Williams, I'll have my client contact you directly. We also had an inquiry from the sheriff's office because the gun range is to the north, and my client worked things, exchange information, and
Yep.
they're completely comfortable, and I'll have them reach out to you directly as we go through this process, because it is a process, as Denise and Amy have said. But thank you.
That's fine, thank you.
All right, thank you, Amy. Yeah. Okay. So having answered your questions, right?
Yes, sir.
Then do you make a motion?
Sure, I'll make a motion to approve, was it PC?
Three.
A second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion of the motion? All approves by signifying by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Okay.
Good day, Planning Commission members. Jessica Coal with the Planning and Development Department. Item PC7 is PDD 7586 in the name of Jordan Road and others for a requested change in zoning from AR Agricultural Residential District to MPUD Master Planned Unit Development District to allow for 220 multiple family units and 74,813 square feet of commercial and office use on approximately 27.75 acres. The property is located in central Pasco County on the north side of State Road 52, approximately 2 miles east of Interstate 75. The subject parcels currently reflect their original AR zoning district. And future land use classifications of ROR are on this site. The subject site contains single-family dwelling unit and agricultural pursuits, is within the South Market area and the urban service expansion areas, but is outside of all rural areas. Land Development Code, or Section 402.2C8 of the Land Development Code allows for deviations from the code if approved by the Planning Commission and the Board of County Commissioners during public hearing for any application for an MPUD rezoning. Variations shall be allowed where the BCC specifically finds in the particular case that the proposed variations meet or exceed the intent of the code. The applicant is seeking the following variations. Ldc Section 901.6011, continuing the existing street pattern and street access to adjoining property. The LDC requires streets within a proposed development to be connected to adjacent areas to provide proper traffic circulation. Per staff analysis, requiring vehicular connection to Hartman Road would trigger substandard roadway improvements on Hartman that would make the project financially infeasible and would not continue the existing street patterns. If the residential area is designed as a private residential community, it would be desired to allow for gated connections to the residential area internal to the subject site. Requiring a vehicular connection to Hartman Road would encourage public access through the residential area to Hartman Road, thus limiting the developer's ability to secure the community with gated access. In accordance with LDC Section 1003.1, gates, fences, and walls, gating vehicular access connections to and within residential areas can be permitted as the gate would be considered part of the private residential development's entrance feature. Therefore, the applicant is proposing to provide a vehicular connection to State Road 52, vehicular cross connections to the east and west of the proposed non-residential area, and a 10-foot multi-use path within the proposed residential area to connect to the possible future Orange Belt Trail along Hartman Road to the north. The applicant is also requesting the option to gate the internal connections to the proposed residential area. Land Development Code Section 901.7 bicycle facilities and Section 901.8 pedestrian facilities require bicycle and pedestrian facilities to be installed in a manner that will not conflict or not be obstructed by lateral and or vertical structures such as power lines, telephone poles, and the like. Per staff analysis, providing a gated access internal to the residential portion of the development allows for the option to provide a secure community and enhance the bicycle pedestrian facilities for the proposed residential area. If the residential area desires a secure community, gating the bicycle and pedestrian connections internal to this residential area would be considered entrance features to this residential community. Gating the bicycle and pedestrian connections for the residential area, including the multi-use path access to the future county trail, would still meet the intent and purpose of these LDC sections to provide safe and efficient accommodations for bicycles and pedestrians. Land Development Code Section 905.2D5, perimeter landscape buffering and screening, requires perimeter landscaping on all sides of a lot to provide separation of uses and intensities. The Land Development Code requires a 15-foot Type B landscape buffer within the commercial and office use and the residential use, totaling a 30-foot buffer between the proposed uses. Per staff analysis, the separation of intensities can be accomplished within a reduced landscape buffer width while accommodating perpendicular interruptions in the proposed buffer for vehicular and pedestrian connectivity from the residential area to the non-residential area. Therefore, the applicant is proposing to provide a 10-foot Type A landscape buffer on the non-residential portion of the site, except for areas to provide vehicular and pedestrian connectivity throughout the project site. This is intended to create an aesthetically pleasing development and encourage non-vehicular travel. Presented here is their master plan, and the second page represents their connectivity plan. The proposed request is found to be consistent with the Land Development Code and the provisions of the Pasco County Comprehensive Plan that are applicable. Therefore, this item comes to you with staff recommendation of approval, subject to the conditions of approval in your packet. I do want to say that there was an ex parte attached to this item, and it was identified that the naming was incorrect, so it was attached to this item. The actual meeting was for a different item. When this goes to the board, that ex parte will not be with this item. It is for another MPD that will be coming up to you folks later. And Mr. Chair, you did approve the request for 7 minutes for the applicant.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So, the applicant's present? Okay, is there anyone here to object? I see no objections. Do we have any questions of the applicant, or would you like to, you still have your 7 minutes if you want to use them?
Yes, sir, just briefly, portion of that. Bruce Landis for the applicant. My address is 3810 Northdale Boulevard, Tampa 33624. I have been sworn. We are certainly in agreement with staff on the recommendation of approval and consistency with the Land Development Code and the Comprehensive Plan. I have with me today my experts that I would like to introduce to you in any event that any of you have questions, or anyone from the audience. Theo Petrich, multimodal expert and traffic expert. Dallas Evans, planning and environmental and stormwater expert. I'd like to submit their CVs in for the record.
Okay. You have a motion to receive?
Motion to receive and file.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman and Commissioners. Really just to give a quick overview of this project. This is a planned mixed-use development where our focus is for live, work, stay, play community. This will be an integrated, as Ms. Kowal mentioned to you, residential and commercial component. Very typical of this are the interconnections and the walkability and bicycleability of the community. Our intention is to be able to, if the trail is planned along Hartman Road to the north, to provide a connection there. Our development is front and centered on State Road 52, and so that's where the vehicular access is planned. We do plan to have connections, bicycle pedestrian connections to the adjoining properties, and one vehicular connection to the adjoining property on the north. No vehicular connection is planned to Hartman. A lot of it because of the shape of our property. We don't need connection there, and Hartman Road is a beautiful rural scenic roadway as well, and we'd like it to stay that way as well. I'm going to jump to our development pattern just to give you an idea. This is a build-to-rent community, so it is, we're using the multifamily category. For that, these are a couple of examples of our currently planned buildings. This is the Benton and the Jernigan. So these are, they have an appearance of townhomes, but they will be, part of our build-to-rent community. And this other is the Stillwater version. As you can see, these are very residential in character. And so that is the style of our development that we're planning. As Ms. Kowal mentioned, we are planning an integrated community with bike and walking. And so that's the intent of our project, and my staff and I will be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, do we have any questions from up here?
So what's gonna be on the north? Is that just retention, or?
Yes, sir, that's kind of the natural lay of the land
Right.
in that area, and so we would like to keep that as kind of open space as much as we can, and staff indicated that the anticipated county byway trail might go along Hartman Road, and if that's the case, we'd like to connect the center of our community to that with a wide walkway, bikeway. Maybe we'd probably keep it, maybe a natural surface condition.
Thank you.
So is this what you'd call like workforce housing?
Well, with the trend, Mr. Chairman, of remote working, we do anticipate a lot of people will, many of our residents will work there at home. We have a planned community center in the very center of it, kind of in that rectangular area there where you see the little green arrows in that area. So I think there'll be a lot of people that, will work perhaps in the commercial area, maybe working from home, maybe working in the area. But that's our design for the community, is to live, stay, play in that. And so that's kind of the nice situation of our property, is we would have nice access to that trail if it is built by the county.
All right, very good. Don?
I am curious, do you have an estimate of what the rents will run? Just even crudely.
I don't, John, do you have any idea what the rents would be approximately?
You're gonna need to come to the microphone and introduce yourself, because we have to have everything on record.
I was sworn in before. My name is David Fedak. I live at 82 Crown Point Lane, Williamsville, New York, 14221. I'm the applicant. The rents are probably going to be in the $1,800 to $1,950, $2,000 range. That answers the question.
All right, that answer your question, Don? Yeah.
I do, Mr. Chair. One more for Bruce, if I could. I see you've got gated bicycle access on the east and west, but it looks like that's private property on both residential on both sides, right? Is there a plan for future development there or something, or why would that be?
Nothing, no, sir, Mr. Pearl, not that we're aware of. We indicated to staff, when they ask us if those adjoining property owners have a PSP or a PDP underway along with us, then we would coordinate with them to make that connection. Otherwise, if we're doing the PSP or PDP, we'll just stub out a little walkway there for future connectivity.
Okay, thank you.
If I could add to that, that typically when you get to project like this intense, it's rare that the property owners on either side are gonna stay in a rural character. So staff is anticipating that it's gonna become intense as well. That's why they require those interconnects.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Looks like you're gonna do a good job. A great addition to the county. Congratulations.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate your vote of approval, gentlemen.
All right, so do I hear a motion?
Motion to approve?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion of the motion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign.
Mr. Chair, I don't have any comments on that particular application, but I do want to make a comment to Terry. Terry, since we're starting to see more of these build-to-rent products at Planning Commission, I know that you're working on a memo to deal with architectural issues, lot size issues, landscaping issues for residential products. But my understanding is that staff treats this product as a commercial product because it's rental and there's no lots. The only thing I would ask is, as you're crafting that memo for how we're dealing with residential uses, that you make it clear how we're going to treat this product, because we're starting to see more of it. And so I don't want any ambiguity about whether it's subject to architectural requirements, tree requirements, the typical things that we are requiring of a single-family use. It's my understanding is that we're not requiring it of this product because there's no lots. So I'm not sure whether that makes sense or not. That's not for my decision. That's a board decision. All I ask is that when you do the memo and you finalize it, you are clear about whether those new requirements in terms of architectural, trees, lot size, all those things that you're doing for single-family detached in fee, make it clear whether they do or do not apply to this product. Because the house itself just looks like any other house. It just looks like but we apparently don't treat it like that because there's no lots and it's rental. So again, I don't want to weigh into the policy decision about what we should or shouldn't do with this product. I just don't want, when I was dealing with this particular MPD with Jessica, there was a lot of confusion because we didn't know which of those requirements should or should not apply to this product. And I suspect we're going to start seeing more and more of this product, and so I would just like some clarity in that memo about which of those requirements would apply to this product.
Yeah, I think we can provide that clarity. The subject has been under some discussion with the stakeholders.
I'm just saying, when you're having that discussion with the stakeholders, if you could bring up this issue too, because we had another, Barbara had one too, where this was unclear because it was billed for rent. So again, I don't care what the answer is, I just want clarity so that when these MPDs come through, I know what we're subjecting this product to and what we're not subjecting this product to.
I understand. We'll provide that clarity.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Terry.
And, yeah, I would agree, David. I think that's a great point. I think it'd be important for the county to determine what those standards are, since it's more residential looking, that they probably ought to be, I don't know if that's in the LDC or how that comes out, but I think it makes sense to address it.
Yeah, I mean, it could be in the LDC, but typically this product is coming in as MPDs or including with deed restrictions. It comes in some form that we can condition it, but I don't have any clear direction on how we're treating the product. And my understanding, this is going to be the new major, we're going to start seeing more of this. So I'd like us to get ahead of it and figure out how we're treating it.
I agree, because if one of these came in and there's more residents on either side and they're concerned about what the landscaping, yeah, exactly. We need to get ahead of it.
Yeah, I know for me, particularly, I can't speak for everybody, but that's going to be very important. Yeah, I think Terry and I have already talked about that, so, yeah, it needs to be addressed. Thank you, David.
No problem.
Okay. So, let's see, I think we had the vote, right? Yeah. So, you're good?
Yeah, I made my comment after the vote because I didn't want it to interfere with your vote. So.
That's okay. Next time you can interfere.
Yeah, it wasn't about that particular application. I was just, since I was bringing it up because that was an example of this product.
Good point. good point. Okay, next.
No, I think it's Cross Park. We're
Yeah,
doing
it's
it,
not P9.
which is P9.
9, yeah.
So the next item is Cross Park, which is P9. Who's handling that?
Hi, Kayla Lloyd with Long Range Planning. Okay. So PDD 220020 is a comprehensive plan text amendment in the name of CPAL 2125 Cross Park PD. This is a visual for the property located in the South Market area. The applicant is proposing a text amendment to sub-area policy flu 7.1.17 Cross Park PD to convert existing ALF assisted living facility entitlements to multifamily residential and commercial uses. The property is located at the southeast intersection of State Road 54 and Henley Road. And the resolution to the applicant's proposal is to amend the sub-area policy flu 7.1.17, and there is a companion substantial modification to the existing Cross Park and PUD master plan unit development. Oh, sorry. Oh, okay. So the following policies are consistent with the proposed text amendment. Next slide. The subject property is located at the southeast intersection of State Road 54 and Henley Road. The existing future land use classification is PD, plan development, and the applicant is requesting to change the existing ALF entitlements to allow for multifamily residential development situated behind non-residential uses to ensure the preservation of employment-generating uses along the State Road 54 corridor. Here's the applicant's proposed conceptual plan for Cross Park PD. In accordance with the draft sub-area policy text amendment, the applicant and staff have negotiated policies to ensure the following: a preservation of a minimum of 3 acres along State Road 54 for 45,000 square foot medical professional office use. Residential uses are set back behind non-residential uses and are not permitted along State Road 54. And non-residential uses identified in the sub-area are located along State Road 54 to ensure viable employment-generating uses are preserved. And lastly, additional non-residential square footage shall be vertically integrated with the multifamily development to preserve a balance between residential and non-residential development along State Road 54. So with that, we recommend the LPA, Local Planning Agency, find the amendment consistent with the comprehensive plan and approve to the BCC Board of County Commissioners. And with that, staff is available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Terry, sure, of course.
At the last commission meeting, there were a couple of there was a discussion about the different policies that we just cited on the overhead. Would you like for me to sort of walk through those, or how would you prefer to proceed?
Mr. Chair, if I could, I mean, since I was the one that raised the issue, I could try to answer. So, because I read the whole analysis that the applicant did, and I would say that in general, you all did a pretty good job analyzing the policies, and particularly economic development policies. The only issue I had with really the whole analysis was the assumption that an ALF or ILF is functionally equivalent to an age-restricted multifamily use. I think that they are distinct uses in our code. I don't agree with that assumption. I don't think they're equivalent in terms of job generation. I don't think they're equivalent in terms of trip generation. I don't think that argument is consistent with our code. That being said, it's clear you all have done a good job of demonstrating that it's an improvement economically because the prior policy would have allowed them to do ALF or ILF over the entire site. I agree that that is an accurate statement. And that the new policy requires them to set aside the acreage in the front for office and retail, which is an improvement from a job generation standpoint. So I think the Planning Commission can find it consistent with the comp plan, those policies that you cited. I'm not really, my preference would be though that you will not continue to make this argument and that the Planning Commission not find that an ILF is an equivalent use to an age-restricted multifamily apartment use. I don't think that's supported by our code. I don't think it's supported by reality. And so I don't have a problem with Planning Commission. Well, I did one other question, but it isn't about economics. It's about schools. But from an economic development standpoint, I don't have a problem with a finding of consistency as long as that argument is withdrawn or deleted from the rationale for approval.
Right, if I may provide a response. I understand what the applicant submitted in the attached material that was provided as part of their economic analysis of the site. And much of the information in there was indeed used as part of our analysis to compare against the policies of the comprehensive plan and other projects that we've worked on. And I understood the ILF argument that they were making as zero employee, of having the potential of having 0 employees, and that they were essentially making an equivalency between ILF and residential. But in the way that the Planning and Development Department looked at it, we were not concluding an equivalency of ALF and ILF with residential. But that those types of uses, the ALF and the ILF, range in on-site job generation. Since some of the ILF, at least some of the ILF that I've seen and worked with in the past, may have visiting nurses or doctors making house calls from other locations, which would mean they're not local jobs. And at least they're not jobs generated on site. And so when we looked at the analysis, we looked at it specifically as what can we confirm as job generation on site, hence the 47.5 versus the 93, and then my citation, which continued their analysis.
I'm not quarreling with the conclusion that you're providing more jobs with this new proposal than you were under the prior proposal. I'm not quarreling with that conclusion. I'm only quarreling with the assumption underlying part of that conclusion that an ILF is potentially a 0 job generator. And the reason I think that's inconsistent with the definition of congregate care facility that's in our mobility fee definitions, which specifically requires some level of on-site services. It may not be medical, but it certainly requires some provision of on-site dining, transportation. There is some level of job generation even in an ILF facility, even if there's not medical.
Right.
And so I don't think this conclusion that it's potentially 0 could possibly be accurate. All that being said,
right,
I agree with the end result. Okay, the end result is that it's a positive in terms, your new proposal is clearly a positive in terms of job generation. I just don't want anything in the record that indicates that staff is supporting a position that an ILF is an equivalent use to a multifamily apartment building.
Right, and so I think for the record then, the Planning and Development Department was not concluding that as part of our analysis.
We can state that in our
So,
motion.
I mean, the applicant can make the argument that they're going to make, but as the Planning and Development Department for the county
I also don't think the Board of County Commissioners agrees with that position based on certain statements that were made at the last board meeting. So all I'm saying is that I think the Planning Commission can recommend approval of this. I think it is consistent with the policies. I just would like it to be with a finding that that is not an accurate statement.
That's up to the commissions, but the Planning Department was not looking at it in that way. So in terms of setting a planning precedent for the county, we were not concluding any kind of equivalency in this.
Okay, well, I think if our motion includes that, you know, that comment that David just made, then I think it'd be clear to all concerned in the future that we're not making that equivalency.
So then
It's
my
better
only,
just to make it
my only
clear.
other question was not economic related, it was just a question for Chris Williams, is that the analysis I saw shows that Rushi Middle School and Sun Lake High School are over capacity, but it appeared that you were still in support of the application. Is that because you have other plans to create capacity? I mean, it's a question, really.
Yeah, so certainly our schools in that area are over capacity. We have a K-8 scheduled to open in 2025. That'll help with the elementary and middle. The opening of the 6 through 12 academy in Angeline may impact Sun Lake, but we don't know until that opens in 2023. And we'll see what the impact of Sun Lake is, but in the long run, we have additional high school capacity planned for like the Bexley community, so that'll help with Sun Lake. Short-term wise, it's a concern, but long-term we'll have additional capacity to accommodate that.
Okay. That answers my question. I don't know if
Okay.
the applicant or the public want to say anything. I just wanted to, I didn't want to make Terry get up and repeat the entire analysis because there was only that one issue that I had with the analysis.
Cutting some slack.
Yeah.
Go ahead. PowerPoint.
Good afternoon, Planning Commissioners. My name is Nicole Neugebauer. I'm a land use attorney at Stearns Weaver Miller in Tampa. My address is 401 East Jackson Street for the record. I'm here today on CPAL 2125 to modify the Cross Park PD. The development team is also here today. We have Tim McEachern from LIV Development. We have Links and Associates that are online and available if you have any transportation questions. Alan Dowd is the broker who's here representing the landowner, and the landowner Hitesh Patel is also here. I'm going to turn this over to Cynthia Spidel, an AICP certified planner, who is going to give you a brief presentation.
Thank you. My name is Cynthia Spidel, Stearns Weaver, 401 East Jackson Street, and I have been sworn. So we have a backup presentation to go through all the points if you need us to go through it, but it sounds to me like we don't really need to. And just to kind of clarify the zero, the 47.5, we actually had a really hard time trying to find job generation statistics for an ALF or an ILF. So we went and did a lot of research, and there's a, in the supplemental report, there's a fast fact from the state that talks about ALF. And the reason why it said zero was because we felt as though from the last Planning Commission meeting that you wanted us to look at the medical staff potential of an ILF or an ALF. So, and as to David's point, you know, we went through, we checked the code for independent living, we checked the statutes, we checked the mobility fee technical support document, and congregate care is listed in the mobility fees as residential. So, and there's no requirement for medical staff, so that's where that came from. But we did do an assumption based on the average for an ALF in the state of Florida, which is in your packet. Happy to explain it if you need us to. We have Mr. Patel, who's the landowner, who would like to come and speak, but I guess I would like to know if you'd like me to go through the presentation or not.
I don't think you need to go through all of it. I don't agree that just because there's no medical jobs doesn't mean there's no jobs.
Yes, and the better way to put that, and I would have gone in that in my presentation, is that, you know, multifamily hires groundskeepers and stuff like that as well. So, but
Yeah,
the requirement was.
I think an ILF, if you go by the definition of congregate care facility in our
Yeah.
code, it clearly requires on-site facilities for dining,
Sure.
Recreation, transportation, housekeeping.
Sure.
That's a higher level of employment than a typical apartment complex. And so,
But I think the point of the supplemental report was to show you how, by reserving the minimum acreage for office, by requiring vertically integrated retail, by having locational criteria, that we were improving the economic potential of the
and if that's all you had
site.
said was you were
Yeah.
improving the situation, I would have said, end of story, I agree with you completely, I wouldn't have said a thing.
Right.
But for you to say that ILF has potentially no job generation, I think is wrong. And so.
I understand.
That's my issue.
Yes, I understand, but, you know, we went to the mobility fee ordinance, and it says that their ILF has no, congregate care has no requirement, may or may not have medical staff. I think that's what it says.
you're arguing an unarguable point, so I think you just.
Sure.
I don't think
Thank
you
you.
can convince the planning commission or the board of county commissioners that an ILF and ALF has no job generation potential. I just don't think you're gonna win that argument. I'm making sure it's factually accurate.
We understand your point, and I agree that I think this, there's an agreement to disagree here on this one, and if you would like, we can go through our presentation that will outline consistency with the comprehensive plan. We're happy to answer any questions that you may have. We are open to whatever you would like for us to present.
We don't need to have a debate, as long as you're okay with fixing that in your report, that you're not making that assumption anymore, we can move on.
Yeah, I think we can move on. I don't think we need to keep beating a horse.
We can submit another report. We did find out about this argument about the ALF versus ILF as we were walking into this room, so we're happy to work with staff to make sure that that is struck from any ordinance or recommendation for you. But we did just find out about this, so it will take us some time to work with staff to make sure that it's accurately reflected.
Okay.
Well, I just think our motion should
I think it's just the
contain that
assertion.
reference, yeah.
Sorry, it's the assertion that there's, you're tying that to medical staff being on site. So David's saying that that's not the case. So there's no dispute. I think, we all agree up here that your economic analysis shows that this is going to be significantly improve that area. But it's just the assumption that there's zero employment on staff because it's all tied to medical staff, which is not accurate.
So I
At
think
this
we're at
point,
a
can
point
Mr.
where.
Patel come up and read his letter into the record?
Pardon me?
He's the landowner, would like to speak and read a letter into the record.
Okay.
Hitesh Patel, 6909 Arabian Road, Odessa, Florida, zip code 33556. I would like to take this opportunity to share with you some of the history of the property. In 2008, we successfully changed the zoning from agriculture to commercial retail. In 2010, there was a real estate depression, so we were not able to obtain financing for construction, and there were no demand for commercial retail users. In 2015, we successfully reapplied for the zoning change to allow the senior living. As part of this zoning approval, we committed to Pasco County to convey the portion of our property as right-of-way, and we agreed to pay $84,178 plus for paving assessment to pave Henley Road. In 2017 and 18, I undertook the process of designing the permitting the property for independent living and memory care. We processed through much of the permitting, and we received approvals from FDOT, SwiftMud, and the county. We ultimately had numerous offers and interest for the IL-AL-MC development from senior housing operators. However, during their due diligence, each group ultimately backed out of the deal. Their feasibility studies all showed that the market would not sustain and support the senior living development at this location due to oversupply within 10-mile radius and not enough demand to support the project. We attempted to develop the project ourselves, but the bank would not provide construction financing for the IL, AL, and MC development due to oversupply concerns. Furthermore, with the onset of the COVID pandemic, the restricted demand of the IL, AL, MC had made it much harder to develop senior living facilities in this current market. We have now made the difficult decision to sell the property since we cannot realize our original vision of developing the property for senior living. My family and I have all put our lives saving on this property. Furthermore, we have been paying heavy property taxes forever, $18,000 a year since 2008. We have paid $84,178 paving assessment for over the past 5 years to convert Henley Road from a dirt road to a paved one. We have done everything that was asked by us by Pasco County. The proposed mixed-use project envisioned the live development will include multifamily development, retail, and healthcare development that will create high-paying jobs and taxes, which will benefit Pasco County. I humbly request that you all support this great project development. Without the amendment to the property zoning, it will remain undeveloped for the foreseeable future and will provide a significant financial burden to my family.
Thank you very much. Okay. With that, I think, is there anything else we need to hear?
I certainly like to say a few things.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you why I oppose this. I hear oftentimes that the county says we need more jobs in Pasco County. And that's the truth, we do. You said, you indicated that this long-term, this assisted living, long care facility does not produce the jobs. Well, let me finish. Go ahead, let me just finish, please, and then you can bring up my ears if there are any. Well, I checked with my son. It's last time this came up. He indicated to me that if you put about 100 to 125 bed facility in, you would create approximately 150 jobs. You would create the bulk of the jobs would come from nursing, LPNs, food service, security, janitorial service, administrators, assistant administrators, as opposed to the apartments that you want to build, which would create what, 4 jobs for salespeople and maybe 1 or 2 caretakers or people who repair the facilities. 150 compared to less than, I would say, 5 to 6. I said 10 before. Long care facilities usually turn into, or assisted living, usually can move those assisted living people into a nursing home. And I looked at the nursing home, basically, if you housed 150 people or 125 people or thereabouts, anything between 100 and 150, that's almost like putting people into an apartment complex. And the apartment complex is going to have people living there. They're going to have automobiles, so they're going to create more congestion. So we're housing people in basically the same kind of setting. And that's why I'm going to vote no on this up front, because it creates jobs, good paying jobs. In fact, I was surprised that what a nursing home director gets or assisted living director gets, it's a 6-figure income. And it's not the mid-sixes, it's about the 150 to 200K, depending on the size of the facility. So I think there's a need for assisted living, long-term care facilities, nursing homes. And that's what I think should be built. I think the apartments are not needed at this time in that location or in the area when we want to create jobs. So that's how I'm going to vote no.
Mr. Jerkin, I don't think you need to go back to the applicant. Did you ask for public comment?
No.
Okay. You probably should take public comment before you see if the applicant wants to rebut. We've got a little bit out of order here, so
okay.
You want to ask for public comment?
Okay, so is there anybody here that would like to make public comment or have, that's not part of the applicant's team? I see no one.
Okay, to be clear, rebuttal is typically only for rebut something the public has said, not something that's been said up at the dais. So unless you want the applicant to come up and address Mr. Hansel's comments, you don't have to.
Yeah, we don't really need that, I don't think.
Can we enter Mr. Patel's letter into the record where
Do you want us to receive and file the letter?
Motion to receive and file.
Second.
All right, I think we have a pretty good picture of what we're talking about.
Yeah, so let me just say, I'm going to address Mr. Hansel's comment a little bit, because I actually felt the same way as he did at the last hearing. The concern, the reason I kind of changed my thoughts a little bit, though, is because I looked at what the current comp plan and MPUD allows for this property and what the new proposal allows. And the current comp plan and MPUD allow the entire site to be ALF or ILF. ILF probably does generate less jobs than ALF, but regardless, the entire site could be all that one use. There was no requirement for them to build any of the office or any of the retail, and to me, the office is one of the main, medical office is a very good job generator. And so I do agree with you that an apartment complex is generating a lot less jobs than an ALF or an ILF. But I think what staff is basically saying, and the applicant is, even if true, they're generating more jobs because now they have a commitment for office and retail, which did not previously exist. And it's a commitment for office and retail that's on the frontage of the main road. So that's why I made my point at the very beginning. I don't agree with their assumption that an ILF or ALF is a zero job generator. I completely agree with you, Mr. Hansel. The problem is, though, is that there's a commitment for office and retail now that didn't previously exist, and that's what I think staff is relying on for the job generation. Staff is basically assuming the apartments generate no jobs. They're assuming that the job generation is going to be from the office and retail uses that are going to be on the frontage. That's where the job generation is occurring. Yes, you're going to lose some jobs from the ALF and ILF, but you're going to gain some from the office and retail. So that was why I changed the way I thought about this application a little bit. I'm not saying it's going to change your mind. You may have other reasons you don't want to support this, because unquestionably it's going to create a greater impact on schools, because an ILF and an ALF generates no impact on schools.
Correct.
But you vote however you want. I just wanted you to understand, I want to make sure you understand why I changed the way I thought about this in terms of economic development. But you vote however you feel is appropriate.
Well, the counter to that a little bit would be the fact that the jobs that are generated from the nursing home, which is called that, are high-paying jobs. We know what the retail section will bring. It will bring in basically lower-paying jobs, lower-skilled jobs. The managers may make a high salary as opposed to the nursing home. You're talking about LPNs, they make a decent salary. Your nurses make a decent salary.
Yeah, again, I agree with you, but their commitment is not just for retail, it's for office. It's medical office. So medical office is, I believe, is high-paying jobs as well.
That's true. And
again, I'm not telling you how to vote.
No,
I just want to make sure you understood that
I understand.
why I do agree with their comp plan consistency analysis as it relates to economic development. But it doesn't mean you have to vote for support the application. I just wanted you to understand.
And there's no motion on the floor anyway, so, you know, maybe others feel the same way I do.
Yeah, who knows how everybody else feels. I just wanted to make sure you understood, because it wasn't obvious to me last time that they didn't have any obligation to do the office and retail in their prior proposal. But now it's clear to me that they don't. And now they do have an obligation to do the office and retail.
All right. Well, having said that then, do I hear a motion?
Just a quick question, and this is probably covered in some of these documents, but what are they going from and to again? I know that is that listed somewhere?
So the sub-area policies do show you what the entitlements are going from and to. It's probably the best way to describe it. Let me see if I can pull it up for you.
It's in their supplemental report too.
It's in their supplemental report?
Yeah.
Hi, Commissioners. Amy Heiler, Long Range Planning. As I'm pulling up the document, it is converting existing ALF and ILF to multifamily. So it's a little over 200,000 square feet of ALF to 280 units of multifamily. And then we have an office component that's being converted into a medical office, and then a retail component that is being reduced.
There we go.
And the reason this is confusing, and I'm not blaming anybody, but it was confusing. If it was confusing to me, it was probably confusing to everybody. is this, if you just look at this, it looks like it's a reduction of office and a reduction of retail and adding apartments. If that's all you looked at was this.
Correct.
The problem is you have to dig into the MQD to figure out what they were really obligated to do of these entitlements. They never had any obligation to build any of the medical office previously or any of the retail previously. So the entire site could have been ALF. And so this makes it appear as if they had some obligation to do office and retail in the prior proposal, but they really didn't. Now, one could argue we should have made them do it, but we didn't. And so now staff is making them do the frontage as office and retail, which that obligation, and you need to look at the sub-area policies, but now there is an obligation for the frontage to be office and retail, which didn't previously exist.
So under the revision, they couldn't just not do anything on the frontage and just build the multifamily on the back?
In the current revision?
In this, what we're revising to today, or what they're asking for today?
I think at a minimum, they'd have to reserve the land for, now, could it stay vacant for a while until they, I mean, they could do the apartments first, but they'd have to keep the acreage in the front for the office and retail uses. They couldn't, without amending the comp plan again, they wouldn't be able to give up that land for any other use.
Correct. Yeah, currently, as what's being proposed in the text amendment is a minimum of 3 acres along State Road 54. So anything, and residential uses are set back from non-residential uses within the text amendment. So they cannot, if they do come in with the multifamily, it will be set back and they will be required to do non-residential uses at some point in time along the frontage of State Road 54.
But it could be, to answer your question, does it have to be built first? No.
Because there's no provision.
Yeah, we don't have any phasings or
There's no
anything.
provision on timing. They could do the apartments first, and the frontage could sit there vacant for, I guess, until they find a user. I don't know.
Right, okay, all right, I got you.
Take a look at the 10,000 square feet for retail. That's really not a large footprint for retail.
Right, and with the retail, if you, in the text of the sub-area, it kind of directs where that is going. So there's 5,000 that is dedicated along the frontage, in addition to the 45,000 for medical office, as well as an additional 5,000 vertically integrated within the multifamily development.
Again, I go back to see the ALF being traded out for multifamily apartments, which is gonna create an additional burden on traffic in that area. As far as the medical office goes, 45,000 square feet, probably moderate, but the retail is very small.
Yeah, and the retail, the 5,000 square feet along the frontage is for like a veterinary or pet clinic, so it's still of a medical use.
Retail?
Well, that's how it's defined further in the sub-area policy, in the text of the sub-area policy.
All right, thanks, Amy. Any questions? Any other questions? If not, hear a motion.
Well, I agree with David, and if it weren't for the medical office component and the like, I would have a different opinion of this, but I think that based upon the commitment for the medical office and also the integrated retail in the multifamily, I'm making the motion to approve.
With the clarification of the...
Yes, sir.
As David presented.
Correct, yep.
Okay. So do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, any further discussion of the motion? If not, all signify by saying aye. If you're in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
If you're opposed, no?
No.
No. Guess it'll be a roll call.
Jamie Girardi?
Aye.
John Anderson?
Aye.
Peter Hansel?
No.
Roberto Size?
No.
Chris Poole?
Aye.
Chris Williams?
No.
Chairman Charles Gray?
Aye.
The ayes have it 4-3.
Okay. All right, we're going to take a 5-minute recess. back in session.
So Denise, this is my item, so I'll handle it. Okay, so Planning Commission members, this is a continuation of an item that you heard 2 months ago. And it's a request for alternative relief. You conducted a full public hearing on the item, and it was continued once and then again for the applicant, the county attorney's office, and an attorney for the opposition to try to work out revised conditions dealing with the request. So we've been working diligently for 2 months now on revised conditions, and I'm going to try to highlight those revised conditions for you. But before I do want to thank Mr. Lincoln and Mr. McDonald for working diligently on these conditions, particularly Mr. Lincoln and Ms. Monroe, because I think her hiring Mr. Lincoln helped make these conditions better. I think they did a great service to the community in making these conditions better, so I truly appreciate their efforts in helping with these conditions. But to cover some of the highlights, so the main condition that changed is this one, and I know there's a lot of words here, but I'm going to kind of summarize for you what the main things that changed in this condition. The biggest change was that the facility is now required to create a advisory body or governing body, and then they have to offer a seat on that advisory body or governing body to at least one member of the neighborhood that resides within 2,500 feet of the facility, and a member and another seat on the committee to somebody from either the county's Community Services Department or the Commission on Human Trafficking. And I'm going to get to the issue about the Commission on Human Trafficking a little bit later. But they now have to, the main purpose of this new requirement is to make sure that the facility has better integration, not only with the county, but also with the neighborhood, and make sure that they're making the neighborhood aware of what's going on in the facility. That's why there has to be somebody from the neighborhood on the advisory body, and then also integrate with the county in terms of who will be served by the facility. And I'm going to cover that again in more detail later. The other major change to this condition is we added a prohibition on any minor residents that are adjudicated delinquent based on charges of violent crimes. It used to just cover anybody that was adjudicated delinquent based on sexual abuse or sexual assault. We've now added violent crimes to the prohibition. And then getting to condition 4, we've clarified when a minor will have deemed to have been left the facility without the permission of the facility. And it clarifies that for it to be considered without permission, they have to call 911 or the sheriff's office within 30 minutes of the child disappearing. Otherwise, we're going to assume that they left with the permission of the facility, and which means they would need adult supervision or they'd be in violation of the condition. And then we've also clarified in condition 6, the parking condition. We made it clear that they can't park on the grass or the street, and then we now added a deadline that within 90 days of them taking more than 8 minor residents, they have to add an additional semicircular or drive-through driveway to ensure that all vehicles can arrive, depart, and park at the facility without parking on the grass or street. So the other thing, which isn't really necessarily changed to the text of the conditions, is we've also clarified, and I'll go back to the beginning. This is an important lead into, I'm sorry, I went too far. This is an important lead into the next comment I'm going to make, which is we made it clear that these are the conditions that apply for them to exceed 6 residents in the facility. As I explained at the last meeting, they can do, from a zoning perspective, they can do 6 residents as a right under state law and our code. So these conditions really only kick in when they exceed 6. So on that issue, we've also included in your agenda packet the actual license that is now, because last time we met, they didn't have a license for this facility from the state, and now they do. I'm going to show you a copy of that somewhere here. Okay, and this may be difficult to read on the overhead, but it's also up here. So if you look at this license, there's a couple of key things I want to point out to you. well, three things. One is that it was issued in January 20th, 22, so they've been operating for quite a while with 6 or fewer residents. To the best of my knowledge, there has been no major incident since they've commenced operations. There's been some people that have falsely accused them of certain things, but no major incident that I'm aware of with the facility since it's been opened. Currently, they are at a maximum capacity of 6. To exceed 6, there's a lot of things that would need to happen. One, they'd have to get a new license from the state. 2, they'd have to comply with all the conditions we just talked about. And 3, they're going to have to comply with some additional building code requirements. Specifically, it's my understanding that their septic system would need to be upgraded. There's other upgrades they would need to make to the home to accommodate more than 6. And so there's no guarantee they will actually ever get above 6. We don't know if they will or won't, but the applicant clearly still wants to move forward with the approval because they want to know what would be required of them to exceed 6 residents in the facility. But the most important point I'd like to bring to your attention about this particular license is the type of license that it is. It's a license for an at-risk home. The reason that is important is because if you look at the regulations for this type of license, this particular type of license is the type of license you get to serve youth that are either at risk of becoming victims of human trafficking or are actually victims of human trafficking. That's what this particular license is for. It's to deal with victims of human trafficking or those that are at risk of human trafficking. And the reason that's important is because this is a major issue in our county. And if you look at this resolution that was adopted by our Board of County Commissioners in 2014, we actually created a commission on human trafficking. And I'm going to direct your attention to Section 1, where it specifically says in that resolution, well, it talks about how major of an issue it is in the county. But we specifically said in Section 1, we want to advocate strategies, financially and otherwise, to aid rescue victims of human trafficking. So it's my understanding that this will be the first facility in Pasco County that can actually provide that aid to either victims of human trafficking or those that are at risk of human trafficking. And that's what their license actually is for. It's a very specific license to aid victims of human trafficking or those that are at risk of being victims of human trafficking. So there was a lot of mystery last time, and I'm not blaming the public, I'm not blaming anybody in particular, but there was a lot of mystery last time about what this facility was going to be or what it was. And admittedly, if you only looked at their website, I would be confused too. Or if you just heard the testimony of Mr. Browning last time, you'd probably be confused. But that has now come into greater focus as to what the facility is. It's a facility to aid victims of human trafficking or those that are at risk of being victims of human trafficking, which our board has adopted a resolution saying that this is something we want to encourage. We want to help these potential victims of human trafficking. So with all that additional information, with the revised conditions, the county attorney's office continues to recommend approval with these revised conditions. I don't want to open up the public hearing because you already had a public hearing unless you all really want to hear from the public again. But I do think that it's important that Mr. McDonald, the applicant, and Mr. Lincoln, who are the 2 attorneys who worked with me on the revised conditions, have a chance to add any additional comments they want to make. Like I said, Mr. Lincoln has done a very good job of advocating not just for his client, Ms. Monroe, but I would say for the entire community and getting better conditions here. So I do want him to have a chance to speak to this if we can. I think they're both on WebEx. Does that sound right? Probably should hear from Mr. McDonald first if we can.
They're both on.
Okay, so can we get Mr. McDonald first?
Mr. McDonald, you're unmuted. You can speak now.
You can remove my PowerPoint. Wait, hold a second, Dan. We got to get your face up if we can. There we go. Okay, you're good now.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission, and Mr. Gold. First, let me thank you for letting me appear remotely from Utah. Mr. Mr. Browning there yet, or is he not?
Yes, he's here.
Okay, so would he, I'll get a chance to speak, and then he's gonna get a chance?
If he really wants to say something, that's fine. Otherwise, you can just speak for the facility. It's up to you.
Okay. I just wanted to say a couple of things. You actually summarized this, basically what I wanted to say, and then I'll turn the time over to Nick. But Resolution 14-272 of the Board of County Commissioners found specifically that a collaborative and community-wide effort is necessary to reach those most vulnerable to or are victims of human trafficking, hence the need for the Pasco County Commission on Human Trafficking. And since we last met, we've been able to work with the DCF to narrow down our licensure to meet that need in the county. We want to be part of the solution, not the problem, and we feel that we are part of the solution. And I'll let Mr. Browning speak to that. I wanted to say I agree with Mr. Goldstein. We've had extended conversations with Mr. Lincoln to try to work out these conditions, and I think the best thing that Mr. Goldstein has done for you in these conditions is found in proposed condition number 9, which gives the county a release of liability if our application is approved. And my understanding of the whole purpose of this alternative relief application is to avoid situations where you might be in violation of federal law, or you might have a property that's unequally burdened by your regulations that might violate the Equal Protection Clause. And that is exactly why we're asking for this alternative relief. Just to go all the way back to the beginning of this, the definition of family in the county's code was a little problematic and allows an unlimited number with no census cap of unrelated persons to live together in a single family dwelling, but requires persons with a handicap to go through special procedures. So I think I just wanted to touch on the legal issues, which is really all that should be considered here today, that I think your attorney's done a fine job of putting the county in a position where if this is approved, it results in a waiver of those legal claims that we have. So that's all I wanted to say. I'm going to turn the time over to Mr. Browning, who has a few things that he would like to explain to you about the facility that hopefully answers any questions you have about the program and what goes on.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for hearing me. I just wanted to give you an update that in the creation of this advisory council.
Excuse me, just before you go further, could you just give your name and everything for the record so we can have it?
Sure,
Yeah.
Nicholas Browning.
And I think he may have arrived after.
So you'll need to be sworn.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Dan, Dan and Robert, I think, could you swear in too at the same time while we're doing this? Thank you.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you have to give is the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
All right, thank you very much.
Sure. So the creation, by way of an update, the creation of the advisory board has been a wonderful opportunity. We've diligently worked on having a member of the neighborhood, our next door neighbor, on the advisory council. The human trafficking chair on the Human Trafficking Commission has agreed to be on that board as well, and so she'll be meeting and having intimate involvement with our operations, and so I'm happy to report that. Leanna Dean is her name. She's also representing Baycare Health as a team lead over there. So we've gone to the Human Trafficking Commission and presented there, talked about our program, done community outreach since we've last met, and really we're just committed to being good neighbors and appreciate you hearing us out and giving us some time to show what we're all about. So in being part of a community solution. So That's all I had to say. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anybody have questions? Roberto? Yeah.
Yes.
Wait, Nick, they have questions for you. You can stay up here.
This is more a comment than a question. I have been in the Human Trafficking Commission of Pasco County for over a year. I'm one of the members. I had the pleasure to listen to the presentation. He changed my point of view. That changed my point of view about this project in specific. Now that we understand that they do the due diligence with the neighbors, they present to us the license. We know exactly what they are doing. You know, we are talking about kids that have been abused, kids that need that type of service. That basically, I know, I work with the chairman of the Human Trafficking Commission, Liana, and we agree in the human traffic that this is the kind of solutions that we need to provide to the community that the government cannot provide. And definitely, I'm going to vote to support yes. I agree with Mr. Goldstein, and at the same time, they have been doing absolutely, in my opinion, everything that they need to do to comply and meet the expectations of at least myself, and I believe they are doing the due diligence and working with the neighbors as well in order to satisfy them the best they can. This committee that they created, the Human Traffic Commission chairman will be part of that, and neighbors next door will be part of that. I think it's a really good sign that they are working with the community in order for them to bring solutions and bring those type of service in the more smooth and best way.
Thank you, Roberto. Chris?
I think Don had.
Oh, Don?
Yep.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about Section 2, and specifically, I mean, I appreciate the language is very clear there. It says you will not, they will not be under custody of DJJ, and the admission screening process for the facility shall exclude residents who have been adjudicated delinquent pursuant to, and it mentions the charges. But in a program like this, do you at times take residents, clients, that have not been adjudicated, they have been, let's say, charged, but yet adjudication is being withheld in the event that they can successfully complete your program? Am I making myself clear?
Yes. So just to kind of rephrase back, you're asking if kids coming in, they're dependent children in DCF foster care, they can have charges, yes, and they can come in with like pending, like you said, charges for different things. Yeah.
So someone potentially could.
Can I give a legal answer to that, Nick, that I think
Okay.
I can answer it better.
Please.
So 98.5.35 does specifically allow the court to withhold adjudication. And so, answer that part of your question, yes. There will, at times, or could be, we don't know, but there theoretically could be children there who have adjudication withheld. And that's, if you look at the statute, that's clear under 985.25 subsection 4. And then also section 5. But we have an additional screening criteria that's a backup, because number one, we don't want kids who are a direct threat in our program. They're a liability to us. And so our own screening procedures will not allow, we will not take kids who fail an independent psychosexual evaluation that shows that they are at risk or some kind of direct threat.
And could I further elaborate, if that's okay? So we really are a step down from those care facilities, like I think it's 15 minutes away from our home, like a juvenile detention center, where there is a threat of physical harm. They belong in a higher level of care and more of a lockdown setting than a home type setting for foster youth who do have mental health disabilities and complex trauma. That's the type of youth that we serve.
Yeah, so my only point here is that to read this, and I really don't, words adjudication and much of what we're talking about here is way out of my wheelhouse. But my point is, it sounds as if anyone that has been charged with a crime, might be considered violent, sexual in nature, could have adjudication withheld and be in this program. And that's my only point. It just, to state this emphatically the way it is, I don't think tells the whole story. That's my only comment.
Okay, you ever want to respond to that?
I'd just defer to Dan.
Did you want to say anything else, Dan, to that?
I don't think that's quite accurate. Like I said, we have our own screening criteria that we're agreeing to here.
And that is that we will make, look down towards the middle, it says the facility shall make that determination based upon an individualized risk assessment and psychosexual evaluation of each proposed resident that indicates the proposed resident is not a high risk for harming others. So if we do this, we're going to do a screening of each child. That screening shows that they're high risk. We're not going to accept that child in our program, period. And then you've got the advisory board that's there to oversee, just help us with that. They have access to this information. And then further, we have to protect our children. We have security in place. We have line of sight supervision. We have sensors on the beds so that if a child gets up in the night, we know that they're getting up out of bed. And we have those because of the children's handicaps. Some of them have enuresis, I think is the term, where they're at risk of falling if they get up in the night. And so, yes, while it's theoretically possible that children education withheld are in the larger pool of potential candidates, that's only the first filter. Then they come to us. The second filter is a psychosexual evaluation. If they fail that, they're not allowed in the facility.
May I ask, who performed a sexual evaluation? Is it an MD, a psychologist, psychiatrist?
It can be any one of those. Yeah.
Pardon me?
It can be a licensed clinician or an MD or a psychiatrist, like you were saying. Yeah, and just to give you an idea of where these children are coming from, they're coming from your community. I mean, they're coming from foster care programs, foster care homes that you may not be aware of. They're going to public schools with far less supervision than they do in our home.
If I could just add one more response to what you said, you have to keep in mind that if somebody's had adjudication withheld, they could live anywhere in Pasco County. I mean, they could be your neighbor right now.
That's right.
You could have a child in your neighbor's home that's had adjudication withheld for any of these issues, and they're still living unsupervised.
Right.
So they wouldn't even have the level of supervision that this facility would have. So I could argue this facility is going to have more supervision of somebody who's had adjudication withheld than anybody else in the community would have.
I understand, yes.
But the only difference is there'll be a concentration of juveniles there as opposed to maybe one living next door to you.
I'm not sure that's true. You could have a concentration anywhere in Pasco. I mean,
Okay.
you don't know what your concentrations are. So I don't know if that's necessarily true that you.
Well, he's going to have 6 to 8 or X amount in the facility.
But not all of them are going to have adjudication withheld.
Yeah.
So
We don't know that, you know.
Sure.
Well, I think the other thing that you said, David, was unless they go beyond 6, they're not going to, they can do it anyway.
They could do that anyway.
Yeah. So, you know,
Well, it's not my intention
we're
to-
talking about people that are, we're talking about mainly if it goes beyond 6, these things are all going to come into play. I'm very encouraged. You know, I was a very much a naysayer on this in the beginning, but I'm very encouraged by the fact that they do have they've gone so far you know, by way of David's suggestions that, you know, they've created a civilian authority to impanel them to, you know, to be involved and, you know, and protect the neighborhood and so forth. I think those are good steps. That my only question is, just for clarification, and I don't know if it makes any difference, but when you read about the license, it talked about people that were subjects of trafficking, human trafficking, and or subject to the possibility of human trafficking.
At risk
of human trafficking. And I'm not sure how that fits in with kids that have been adjudicated for sexual offenses.
Well, yeah.
It's like they're the perpetrators, not the...
To be clear, you can be at risk of being a victim of human trafficking without ever going through any kind of adjudication whatsoever. I mean, I'll pull up the regulations, they were in your packet, but you can just be homeless and be at risk of human trafficking.
I understand that, yeah.
I'll try to pull up the exact list of what defines somebody as being at risk. Give me a second.
Well, if I could just say while you're pulling that up, that in the recent Human Trafficking Commission meeting I was at, I heard the statistic that 80% of foster youth are at risk for human trafficking. Just, they're just more at risk.
Oh, we got thousands of people coming across the border that are involved in human trafficking right now.
It's a huge problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to pull up the
While
regulations.
David's looking for that, it's not my intention to oppose it, but I do think I wanted to make clear on behalf of the residents that there's information here that's not stated.
Yeah, so to be at risk of human trafficking, there's a list here. It says history of running away and or homelessness, history of sexual abuse or sexually acting out, inappropriate interpersonal and or social media boundaries, family history or exposure to human trafficking. Out-of-home placement instability demonstrated by repeated moves from less restrictive levels of care. So there's a long list there, but not all those things are people that have been through any kind of adjudication. I mean, you can be homeless and still be potentially at risk of being human trafficking. So John's point is well taken, but you shouldn't take his point to mean that most of the kids coming through the system are going to be in an adjudication withheld scenario.
Right,
absolutely.
Their criteria for being in this home is what I just read to you.
Okay.
Not all those things are, probably most of them are not adjudicated.
Right.
So.
Okay.
David, does that limitation to the at-risk definition and the way condition 1 is worded, are those saying the same thing, where condition 1 says shall be limited to minors with handicaps or disabilities? There's not really a mention or a limitation to at-risk in that condition.
Well, okay, so condition 1 is dealing with a slightly different issue. Condition 1 is dealing with an issue of, in fact, this came to us as a Fair Housing Act and ADA claim, and so you can only state that claim if you're somebody with disabilities. So they wouldn't even be able to have asserted what they asserted unless they were taking residents with disabilities. Now, the definition of what is a disability under the Fair Housing Act and Americans with Disabilities Act is pretty broad, so it is likely that many of these children who meet this definition of being at risk are also going to meet the definition of having a disability. Condition 1 doesn't necessarily require that it be at risk. I think, and I'll let Dan or Nick explain why they didn't want to necessarily make that firm commitment, but I think it has mostly to do with the fact that DCF is always changing their licensing types. And so what they're calling at risk today may not be what the license type they get 6 months from now. And you have to remember these conditions are going to run with the land for forever, basically, unless they come in and get modified. So I think they just didn't want to pigeonhole themselves into this particular license type. That is the one they got, which is pretty good evidence this is what they want to do. But I'll let Mr. McDonald or Mr. Browning explain why they didn't necessarily want to commit to this particular license type.
Well, I can say that you're right on there as far as us working with DCF, and I think that's where a lot of confusion came from initially, is just working out our specialty services and matching those with the license type and the community need. And this specialty setting actually got created by the Families First Prevention Act, a federal act that was kind of the impetus for Florida to create these specialty settings. And so this was just implemented October of 2021 is when kind of the deadline was for Florida to implement these specialty settings. And so it was very new, and that's why we were hammering out what we were hammering out to make sure we matched up the best with the definition of the license.
The other thing I would add is that there's no question that the current need in our community is to deal with potential victims or those at risk of being human trafficking victims. We don't know 5 years from now, 10 years from now, what the need will be. I mean, maybe we'll actually have solved human trafficking 10 years from now. We don't know, but we could have. Hopefully we do. But
Yeah.
at that point, they would probably take somebody else who's at risk of some other issue at this facility. So I'm not sure. But the important thing is the requirement that they have a seat on the advisory, a neighborhood seat, and somebody from the county on their advisory board. That's going to continue in perpetuity. So regardless of who they're serving, the neighborhood and the county will have input on who they're going to be serving. That's why that requirement that they have that advisory body is so important, because now we know that the neighborhood and the county will have a seat at the table if they change licensing types or they change the type of people they're going to serve. There'll be somebody that's knowing that that's occurring and being involved.
So that was one of my questions, David. So the advisory committee that we're talking about here, they do have opinion, or they opine on the actual residents of the facility, or once evaluations have been done?
Mr. McDonald and Mr.
Yeah, or
Browning
Mr. Browning, if it's more
kind of the
appropriate
role
for
of the advisory
how
committee.
that advisory committee, what they do, what their function is. Do they opine on, after the evaluations are done?
Yes.
The residency of that, just all those questions.
Yeah, they come into the facility, they can interview the kids, they have full access to our policies and procedures, our operations, and we meet together to discuss those, just so we can have the best outcome for the kids and being good neighbors. Yeah.
Okay, and walking that down the path a little bit, I see that the condition actually, let me preface all my questions by saying that I agree with what Roberto said and some of my colleagues up here, that when I've read what's been presented to us this time, it's really changed my opinion. I think there's a huge need, and I told you before that my son is in a similar type program over on the East Coast for different issues, but so I think there is a huge need in the community, but just from a conditional basis, and maybe this is more appropriate for David, but I see that we preface the advisory committee that's saying so long as DCF regulations require the creation of, is it really necessary to say that if the intention is for that advisory committee to remain active the entire?
I'm going to defer to Mr. McDonald on that. I'm not opposed to striking that qualifier, but I'm going to let the applicant say whether they're willing to make that commitment to be more binding.
Okay.
The current license clearly requires this body.
Okay.
And I think most licenses do require a similar body. But Mr. McDonald, I guess, do you understand the request or the question? Wait, we can't hear you. I think you're muted,
sir.
Sorry about that. Yes, I understood the question, and maybe to answer the question before that, why didn't we specify this exact type of facility in condition 1 or condition 2? I'll just go back to what I said about the work that your attorney has done here. And he'll tell you this, in my opinion, none of these conditions are legal under federal law. Why? Well, that's because the county does not impose these same conditions on unrelated groups of non-handicapped people. And under federal law, it's very clear that you can't do that. But what your attorney has done in a very Herculean effort because he's gone through many hours of negotiations with me and Mr. Lincoln. He's negotiated condition number 9, which protects the county. So if I had my druthers, there'd be no conditions. Now, with that said, you know, we want to help the community. Like we want to be part of the solution, not the problem. And so we did not, because the need may change in the future, we did not want to tie ourselves down to that particular type of facility. Now, as far as the advisory board goes, I'll just read what the statute says, right, or what the DCF regulations under the Florida Administrative Code say right now, and it's under 65C-46.003. It says, for-profit organizations shall maintain advisory boards which review the operational policies and practices, inspect facilities and programs, conduct interviews with children and staff members, and review matters affecting the care of and services to children. Members of advisory boards shall not have a proprietary interest in a child caring agency or program. So here's how I look at it. One of the conditions of approval is that we remain licensed with DCF. And so long as we remain a for-profit facility, we're always going to have an advisory board. Therefore, there's no need to change the condition because it's taken care of by the condition that we're always required to be a licensed DCF facility.
Fair enough. Thank you for that clarification. That definitely cleans that issue up. So I do, Mr. Chairman, have a couple more questions, and it's kind of more cleanup on, I guess, some of the conditions of approval, because I see, for example, David, in the conditions, we interchangeably use, or at least in the beginning of condition 2, the resident or occupant is kind of, it seems to be used in that, in the same context that, I mean, we're referring to. So the DCF approval and finding of fact 15 is 6 residents specifically.
Yeah, that's intentional.
Okay.
Because DCF is basically regulating the number of residents that are under care.
Okay.
But the Florida Building Code regulates occupancy. And
Okay.
so it's possible that they could still be under the limit of residents that the DCF allows, but over the number of occupants that the Florida Building Code allows. Okay. So we don't, that sentence is talking about the maximum number of residents or occupants permitted by the Department of DCF or applicable building codes, whichever is more stringent. So it may be that the Florida Building Code limits their total occupancy to a number that's lower than what DCF allows.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, and that's what I wanted to clarify. I thought that's where that was going, but because let me read through my questions here really quick. So, because yeah, I mean that's obviously because occupants of the staff. I mean there's a ratio of supervisory staff to residents that's going to be there. So that's all going to be taken in the context of the occupants of the and what the limitations are to that.
The Florida Building Code says you can't have more than 10 occupants, and it wouldn't matter what DCF said. Which this is kind of an issue for them right now, which is the Florida Building Code is probably more of a limit for them right now than DCF. Because there's certain improvements they'd have to make to the home to get higher number of occupants in the home.
Occupants or residents?
Occupants.
Okay. So does that
tell me if I'm wrong? Is it your understanding, Mr. McDonald, it's occupants? Or Mr. Lincoln, because you're.
I appreciate the attention to detail on this. That's impressive. It's my understanding is occupants under the building code is the term, in that it's residents here, elsewhere.
The general intent of the first sentence is they can't go more than what the Florida Building Code allows or DCF allows. Whatever the more stringent requirement is, they're subject to.
Okay. Yeah, that all makes sense to me, and that's, my questions were all kind of stem from that definition difference. So I think that, looking at my list, I think that clarifies it. But obviously a lot of the conditions are, for example, the extension of the driveway or putting the drive-through driveways tied to that is specifically tied to 8 minor residents. That's easy, but when I read that first condition approval or the second one, I was a little bit confused with that.
And I think that was only because I don't think the Florida Building Code strictly regulates residency.
Right, right. Yeah, it's gonna be more of a code issue, so I mean, that's captured in the requirements to comply with all the codes, so, okay.
All right,
Thank you.
anything else?
I'd like to hear from Mr. Lincoln and the residents. I know we had made a comment about the residents. I just would feel more comfortable on which way to go and vote on this. And if you do go to Mr. Lincoln and the residents, I'd like to say I think David did an outstanding job on drafting and negotiating this, and I think both attorneys did to a certain extent. I think Mr. Goldstein did an excellent.
Well, don't give me all the credit, because Mr. McDonald, because Mr. Lincoln was heavily involved in this too, and I think we should let him speak at this point.
I'm sure the credit can be shared, but I'd still like to hear from residents and Lincoln. That's
All right,
possible.
Mr. Lincoln, is Mr. Lincoln present?
Thank you. I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. For the record, Robert Lincoln, 2055 Wood Street, Suite 206, Sarasota, Florida. And I am here representing Noel Monroe, who is present and in the audience. And again, I want to say thank you to both Mr. Goldstein and Mr. McDonald for the amount of work that was put into this. And it's kind of a difficult position that I'm in, because let me say that I think there are still legitimate concerns about what could happen if there were 12 or 14 or 16 boys in this house, but that would be true of any house that might have that many people in it. And unfortunately, the combination of the regulatory regime and the Fair Housing Act doesn't give us a huge amount of room to simply say prohibit it. So I will say there's still concerns about how this is going to work in the long run. These conditions, I think, reflect the best job that we could do to try to manage a lot of the most significant issues within those constraints. But I don't want to underestimate that there are still concerns about what would happen if this had a lot more kids in it. That said, I want to go to the questions that were raised about number 2 and how that worked and how it actually interacts with some of the other things. Because the point that was made about adjudication versus non-adjudication goes to a key part of the issue, is that under Florida code, somebody could have committed an act and the judge can still decide to withhold adjudication. And that means that there is this potential for this group of people who would be, might be potentially allowed to be in the house under that first provision that only prohibits people who've been adjudicated. And it means that we're all trusting, the neighborhood's trusting, the community is trusting that screening process that's also provided there, and EYS's self-interest in keeping potentially dangerous kids out of the home would be sufficient to weed out kids who are a significant risk. And part of the reason that the advisory report is important is as was identified, is that they have the ability to audit and to make sure that the facility is conducting those evaluations in an appropriate way, and that they're really doing their job at making sure that this kind of, you think of Venn diagram and overlapping things, that the kids who might have had adjudications withheld for something that was fairly serious, and who might pose a significant risk, are kept out of that facility and are somewhere that's safer for the community. And you know, given that we're talking about kids at risk, I will make a couple of comments on that. I mean, we are talking about kids who are otherwise in the foster care program. they can't go home. So these aren't the kids whose parents are trying to buy their way out of trouble. These are kids who can't go anywhere else. And in terms of kids who may have acted out at some point or another, well, the vast majority of kids who are going to get into trouble for committing those kinds of acts are going to be kids who've experienced them. And so that's why they're at risk. That's why this has got to be evaluated. That's one of the reasons why it's important to have facilities for them. And so when you look at how all these things are set up, there's this screening to make sure that the most dangerous kids who are significantly dangerous, aren't out of there. There's supervision requirements that then tie to the kids to make sure that they are adequately supervised, given that we're talking about kids who may be troubled. And there's other provisions regarding school and the handoffs and the other kinds of things to make sure that overall the facility is well run with respect to not having impacts on the community. Now, again, the advisory board is important because we all know that it doesn't matter what conditions we impose on people, they have to be enforced or followed. And trying to get them enforced by the county can be a problem. I think having the advisory board and their ability to have people from the neighborhood who will have the right to review the operations and know what's going on provides a great institutional check on the facility just kind of running out and doing whatever it wants, regardless of the conditions, regardless of whatever else might be imposed. So it was well thought out to try to address the problems that might arise within the constraints that we have, which is that it may be impossible to simply say that they can't have more than 8 kids or 10 kids, 12 kids. It's pretty clear that DCF won't license them for more than 14. There are still concerns, but I think what we've done here is create conditions that go as far as we can to regulate it and to try to be sure that this facility will be the benefit to the community for helping out these kids who really do need it, without becoming the larger community, without becoming a problem for the neighborhood and the immediate neighbors. Thank you for the time. That's what I wanted to say. Again, I can't say that it's enough to make people happy about it, but I think this is enough to make folks feel that the most significant risks have at least been looked at and thought out and addressed.
All right, thank you. So is there anybody else here from the audience that has a comment?
No residents would like to speak?
If not, I'd like to hear a motion.
I move a motion to approve the Elevated Youth Services request for alternative relief.
All right, so we have a motion.
And that's with the conditions as?
With the conditions that was
okay.
Presented to us today.
And do we have a second? We have a motion to approve, and do we have a second?
I will second it.
Okay. So now we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion of the motion?
My concern is not the work that's been done to try to negotiate a happy medium, and I don't believe there is a happy medium. My concern still deals with some of the physical aspects of that piece of property, specifically the sewer system and the water, which we've never addressed. And I don't know if it will be addressed. I don't know if the sewer system will back up sufficiently and it becomes a health problem for the residents, if that's the term I can use.
Yeah, the only thing I would say is that they do have to comply with all Florida Building Code and health and sanitation codes of the county, and that's one of the conditions. So they already know that their current sewer system is probably not adequate to handle many more than what they have. So they would have to upgrade it to comply with the health and sanitation codes of the county.
Okay, who will verify that? Because what I've seen.
Our building department will ensure
That's
that,
permanent.
Okay.
trust me, I've had talked to our building department about this facility. They are definitely on top of making sure they comply with the Florida Building Code in terms of sewer, sprinkler systems, anything that would be required for the health or safety of the residents under the Florida Building Code, or the Health and Sanitation Code. That's what they're in charge of doing.
I understand that the county will be.
And they've already told Mr. Browning the limitations of what he can and can't do without complying with those code provisions.
Well, for what I have seen in newspapers and others, they have moved forward with on this, including having an open house and those kinds of events. In other words, what I'm saying is, this is a very aggressive company, and sometimes folks can still go forward, march forward, conduct business, and still let these issues slide. So that's my dilemma. That's where I'm coming from. I don't, you know, we saw photos of vehicles parked on the grass, parked on the street. There seems to be, I will do as I want, not as I should. That's what I've seen demonstrated, and that's my dilemma. I'm not against the project per se because these individuals need this service. I just want to make sure that code enforcement will become aggressive as they, the company that is housing this project or doing this particular task, will be as they are aggressive.
So if they violate any of these conditions, trust me, I'm sure these residents will not be shy about letting the county know that they've been violated. But as Mr. Lincoln said, there is another body that's involved here, which is the advisory body, which will also help with making sure these rules are followed. I would like to comment briefly on the parking, because yes, my understanding is there was an incident where there was parking on the grass, but my understanding is it got rectified fairly quickly, and there's not been any incidents of them parking on the grass since. And so I mean, you're making it sound like there was some blatant disregard of the rules. If there was, I'm sure we'd see more than 3 people in the audience right here. I'm just being honest with you. I mean, I don't think, I've heard, believe me, I've been involved directly with this facility. I posted another sign on the facility for this hearing to see if I would get any more people commenting. And I got the one complaint about the parking, but it got rectified. And I got one complaint about trash, but they bought another trash can, and that got rectified. Other than that, I haven't heard any other complaints about this facility, and they've been open since January. So I don't think, maybe you saw some early newspaper articles that implied that there was some major problem in this facility. I've seen no direct evidence of that since they've been open. So, but again, if they get out of line with these conditions, that's what code enforcement does, and the advisory body will be there as a watchdog to watch over them. So I don't know how that we can do anything better than that. And I guess my final comment is, final comment in terms of my role on the planning commission is, part of my job is to protect the county from liability, but part of my job is also to protect you all personally from liability. And so part of the reason that we are settling this claim is to make sure that the county doesn't get sued, but I want to be clear with you all, if this gets denied, you'd probably all get named personally as well. Mr. McDonald, I didn't want to say that publicly, but he's already told me that if you were sued, you'd all be named personally. So I view you all as friends. I don't want to see you sued, whether it's meritorious or not, okay? I don't want you named in any claim. So I'm trying to protect not only the county from liability, I'm trying to protect you all from liability personally, and reach a result that I think is acceptable to the residents. Mr. Lincoln has done a fantastic job representing those residents. If he hadn't done a fantastic job, you'd probably see a crowd of people here. There's a reason that the only person that spoke was Mr. Lincoln, because he did that good of a job representing them. So I'm not sure what else we can do. I understand you still got some level of discomfort, but we're trying to resolve a potential legal claim. We did the best we could to protect the residents. Mr. Lincoln did the best he could. I did the best we could. Mr. McDonald helped. Mr. Browning has done everything he could since the first hearing to try to integrate himself with the community. meet with the Commission on Human Trafficking, make it clear that this is a service to the community. If you still want to vote against it after all that, I guess you still can. My advice to you is not to do that and to move into approval.
I'd just like to acknowledge David's work, and I think he took a difficult situation here, maybe impossible, and made something that is at least workable and gives the residents a voice in the process.
Chris? I'd actually like to thank Ms. Monroe, Mr. and Mrs. Monroe, for getting involved and actually, you know, without your involvement, none of this would have happened. So thank you for stepping up and taking such an interest in this. So, and the second point is, you know, my second is really predicated upon that advisory committee. That was a game changer for me when I read about that and the approval. So that it does give the community a voice now. The residents have a voice with this. So I feel much more, I don't disagree, Pete, with what you're saying, but I feel much more comfortable that the residents have a true voice now and will be heard.
I tend to concur with that. Had they spoke out, I may have voted differently, but since you remain silent, you were represented by an excellent attorney, I have no problem moving this forward.
So we have a motion and we have a second. If there's no further discussion, is there any further discussion? If not, then I would like to have a vote on the motion. If you're in favor of approval, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
If you're opposed, nay. Okay, motion carries.
Okay, thank you all.
Thank you, David. Excellent job. You handled that just like I told you.
All right, so here is your last item, Planning Commission members, Mr. Chair. Do you mind if I present from here, only because I'm going to be showing you a lot of different things, so I'm going to be doing a lot of driving, so it's easier for me to drive from here than from over there.
You can do anything you want, Denise.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so very much. Okay, so your final item is P6 or PC6, how, as it was called before, it was not a really consent item. PDD 220233. So this is a moratorium on development around airports, and as I always try to open this up, I try to explain to you why we are here. Why are we here today? So the reason, it's not because Denise wants a moratorium around the airports, it's not because of anything else other than our Board of County Commissioners said on January 11th of 2022, made a motion to direct the establishment of a temporary moratorium on development around airports. So in Pasco County, we have 3 public use airports and 1 private use airport. So we have Zephyr Hills Municipal Airport, Pilot Country Airport, Tampa North Aero Park. Those are the 3 public use airports. And then we have Hidden Lake, which is the private use airport. Additionally, we're also here because the county is required under Florida statutes, Chapter 330 and 333, and also the comprehensive plan to adopt airport zoning regulations and land use compatibility. So the Airport Zoning Commission was established by the Board of County Commissioners in 2017. We've held some meetings. We kind of stopped because there were other projects that were a little bit of greater importance at that point in time. However, we picked up again in 2021, and the Board of County Commissioners actually in 2021 in October held a vote to change the way the Airport Zoning Commission was comprised. So prior to 2021, the Airport Zoning Commission just had Zephyr Hills, Tampa North Aero, and Pilot Country. Now the Airport Zoning Commission is comprised of Zephyr Hills, Tampa North Aero, Pilot Country, and Hidden Lake. So additionally, the county has retained a consultant to create noise contour studies around Tampa North Aero Park, Hidden Lake, and Pilot Country. So during this time, we also have adopted interlocal agreements with the City of Zephyr Hills for the City of Zephyr Hills Municipal Airport, and also Hernando County for the Brooksville Airport. To add to that, on February 8th of 2022, just recently, the BCC applied the pending ordinance doctrine to the airport zoning moratorium. What this means is that applications for comp plan amendments, rezonings, conditional uses, special exceptions, site plans, and building permits within the moratorium areas have to be accepted if submitted, and they have to be processed in its normal in their normal course. We have to explain to the applicants that if the applicant wishes to proceed with the application, they're going forward at their own risk, and if the moratorium is adopted, their application may be put on hold for the duration of the moratorium But the moratorium ordinance may contain certain exceptions to the moratorium that would allow some applications to proceed if certain requirements are met. And this is where we're moving forward. So basically, the board said adopt a moratorium. The moratorium that you have in front of you has exceptions. So we're going to start talking about the exceptions. Additionally, I do want to mention to the Planning Commission, as you may know, I did send you some modifications to the proposed moratorium ordinance, and I'm going to kind of switch back and forth and show those to you as we're speaking. Those have also been sent to the clerk's office. Those have also been sent to the airport zoning commission members, and they have also been sent to Ms. Wilhite, okay? And that was all done earlier today. So basically, there are 4 moratorium areas. So and the way that I want to, and I do this all the time when I write a code, I think of myself as the reviewer, because I used to have that role. I used to review building permits, I used to review site plans, I used to review rezoning applications. That was my role. So I think of that, how logically does it make sense to me? So in this case, what we're gonna do is we're gonna look at these 4 moratorium areas, which start with the greatest area possible. So now as we start with the greatest area possible, which is a 20,000 foot area around the airport, and that is called the height obstruction area. So you're gonna have these height obstruction area maps, which that's when I'm gonna show this to you next. So if you would give me just a second. Okay. So these height obstructions, so the next set of maps is going to fit inside this area. And I will show you something that I kind of put together that will illustrate that, but the largest area is the height obstruction area map. That's 20,000 feet. Basically, any application that comes in where something is going to be over 200 feet in height in that area, it's required by the state that you notify the FAA. It's a requirement. So all that we're gonna ask the person to do is notify the FAA and get a no obstruction to air navigation determination from the FAA. That's it, if you're in that 20,000 foot area. You see that all the time when I bring forward conditional use applications for cell towers. That's one of the things that they do. They get a no obstruction to air navigation determination from the FAA. So that's all we're asking people to do, normal in the 20,000 foot area. So now we're gonna start, as I said, we're gonna start drilling down. So the next area, as we're drilling down, and again, I said all these areas, they start reducing, right? So they fit, all these areas start fitting into this 20,000, now it's reducing. So basically there's Part 77 of the Federal Aviation Administration, there's something called surface areas. So basically these are imaginary surfaces established in relation to the airport and to each runway, okay? So there's 4 surface areas, okay? There's the horizontal and conical surfaces. The moratorium basically says you can submit applications in the horizontal and conical surfaces. You just basically, we have to take a look at them, make sure that they comply with Part 77, and you're fine. So you can submit those applications. As we've been speaking to the Airport Zoning Commission, the airport zone, these are people who are pilots, who are, you know, practicing their craft, they're flying. They're telling us that the most important part of the Part 77 surface, the most important parts, because there's a very, very important part, but we're gonna talk at the end. But the most important part of the Part 77 surfaces are the approach and transitional surfaces, okay? So basically, the moratorium says, it doesn't say that your application is prohibited. It just says that if you're going to apply for a comp plan amendment within those areas, within the approach and transitional surfaces, and I'll show you what they would look like in a Part 77 surface map, all that we're basically saying to you is that you could submit comp plan amendments, but you can submit comp plan amendments for, so if your comp plan is not in place and you want to do office industrial, whether it's light or heavy industrial, employment center, planned development, public, semi-public uses, you can submit those applications. However, provided that there is sub-area policies within those applications that would condition uses that may be, and that's one of the changes that we made in the ordinance. It used to say uses that are incompatible. It says potential uses that may be incompatible with airport operations. And we provide examples of what may be incompatible with airport operations. Doesn't mean that that's incompatible, it just means those are examples. Throughout our entire land development code, we use the word for example many, many times. So we're saying, for example, residential uses, landfills, wildlife attractants, uses that will cause visual obstruction such as dust, glare, light emission, smoke, steam, and or fog. Doesn't mean it's prohibited, it means that we can condition it through a sub-area policy if you're applying for a comp plan amendment to make sure that those things are not happening, okay? So drilling down, again, I am a person that reviews plans. In my past life, I reviewed plans. I still review plans today. So we're drilling down. So the first thing is the comp plan amendment. So in that area, I explain the comp plan amendments that can be submitted. Now let's say you're coming for a rezoning. So you have your comp plan in place. Your comp plan is correct. It's the comp plan that you need, but you're coming in for a rezoning. Your rezoning applications have to be accompanied by a written and recorded agreement with Pasco County or enforceable conditions. So like if you're going for an MPUD, you could do conditions. But if you're going for Euclidean zoning, you'll have to, chances are, do a deed restriction. That basically, that your proposed use is consistent with FAR Part 77, and you're complying with 333.025 Florida statutes as to height, and we're prohibiting or conditioning potential uses that may be, again, that's one of the strike-throughs, incompatible with airport operations. All right, let's keep drilling down, because now you've got your comp plan, you've got your zoning in place. Next thing is you're gonna come in for a site plan. So your comp plan is good, your zoning is good, your comp plan okay, your zoning okay, but you want to do a PSP or PDP. The same thing. In your PSP and your PDP, we're going to have conditions that either prohibit or condition potential uses that may be incompatible. Same thing. And as we continue to drill down, so this is basically, you know, we're not prohibiting all the uses. We're just basically saying that there's certain uses that are in these very important zones that the Airport Zoning Commission has told us that these are very important to air operations, which are the approach and transitional zones. So now we're gonna go into the next area, so it even gets smaller, okay? And then I'm gonna show, actually, you know what, let me just show you a really terrible doodle drawing that I've done to show you how these things are kind of like, if you could see what I'm showing up here, the kind of like aqua bluish line, dashed line, is the 20,000. Then the first line, that red, is the conical surface. In between the two red lines is a conical surface. The next line, the blue line, is the horizontal surface. And then the yellow is the noise abatement area. So you see how it starts shrinking, right? So that's why I wanted to show you that. That's why, excuse me, the way that we put this together is we're going from the largest down to the smallest area possible. And then we're going to talk about the runway protection zone at the end. So basically, the noise abatement area this is from Florida Statute 333.03. It says an area contiguous to the airport measuring 1/2 of the length of the longest runway on either side and at the end of each runway center line. Okay? So basically, if you're going to be submitting an application in the noise abatement area, these are the exceptions. You could do a comp plan amendment to commercial, office, industrial, light, heavy, employment center, plan development, public, semi-public, again, with the same thing that I talked to you before, provided that includes sub-area policies prohibiting or conditioning potential uses that may be incompatible with airport operations. That means that your comp plan's not in place, but you need to get a comp plan amendment. Next, going down, rezonings to PO1, PO2, C1, C2, C3, I1, I2, and MPUDs. that propose entitlements, or MPUDs that propose entitlements consistent with PO1, PO2, C1, C2, C3, I1, and I2. Again, accompanied by written or recorded agreement with Pasco County or conditions of approval, so on and so forth. Drilling down, special exceptions, the same thing. Now, there's an exception to this last one. So basically, the noise abatement area may be modified. So the reason why Chapter 333.03 says that this is what the noise abatement area is because that is for a local government or an airport that has not done a noise study. Noise studies have not yet been conducted. Remember, we talked a few minutes ago, or I said a few minutes ago, that we have hired a consultant to do noise studies. Well, those noise studies, hopefully they'll be done in 45 days. So the noise abatement areas may be modified. So let's say an applicant comes in and wants to do one of the uses that is in a noise abatement area. Typically in a noise abatement area, state statute says that you cannot have residential, and it also says you cannot have an educational facility unless the educational facility is an airport school, that you're teaching flying, right? So those things are specifically called out in Florida statute. So let's say someone's coming in and saying, okay, well, I'm gonna do residential, or I'm gonna do whatever, and to us it looks like they're in a noise abatement area based on the noise abatement area maps that we have, which I'll show you in a few minutes, and they're actually part of your packet. So if they conduct a noise study, and Florida statute says what requirements you have to conduct a noise study, and it shows that they are not within the noise abatement areas as stated in 333.03 because the county has not conducted a noise study for that airport, then they can potentially have the uses in that noise abatement area. Now, does it mean that they have to have the uses in the noise abatement area? No, because actually, if you look at the end of this, which basically tells you that based upon the noise study, appropriate uses may be decided by referring to 14 CFR Part 150, Land Use Restriction Table and Notes. So I want to show you that Land Use Restriction Table and Notes does give you a guide, but in the Notes section, and if you give me a second and I'll stop sharing and start sharing again. One of the very important notes in that table basically says, and I'm going to read it straight out because I think it's important to read. The designations contained in this table do not constitute a federal determination that any use of land covered by the program is acceptable or unacceptable under federal, state, or local law. The responsibility for determining the acceptability and permissible land use and the relationship between specific properties and specific noise contours rests with the local authorities. This is very important. So going back to the presentation, I told you I was going to move around a lot. So drilling down, so remember we're going from 20,000 down to conical, down to horizontal, okay? Now noise abatement, but something that could potentially be in the noise abatement as well, because these overlap, right? Are runway protection zones. So runway protection zone is a defined term, and when we were talking to these folks in the airport, they told us that that is like no way, no how should you have anything in the runway protection zone. That is basically the area where the actual aircraft is landing, starting their landing pattern and going into the runway. So that is outright a prohibition for any development in the runway protection zone. So, and to go over the modifications that we made to the ordinance, if I can find the actual, yeah. So if we go to the modifications that we made to the ordinance, because we did receive some information from the Pilot Country Airport, who was very kind to provide, that the runway protection zones are actually specifically called out in the FAA Advisory Circular number 150/5300-13, Table 2-4. And basically sadly, I'm actually really happy that I've learned about all these things, and Elizabeth Blair and I have learned so many things, but our three smaller airports, so Pilot Country, Tampa North Aero, and Pilot Country, Tampa North Aero, and Hidden Lakes, they are visual approach. So they don't have an instrument approach. So if you're a visual approach airport, these specific airports are their runway protection zones are 250 feet in inner width, 450 feet in outer width, and 1,000 feet in length. And again, that is straight out of the FAA Advisory Circular, Table 2-4, runway protection zone dimensions. So anyway, I do want to mention that exempt from this moratorium are the airport communities of Hidden Lake, Pilot Country, and Tampa North Aero Park, because those communities function as accessory uses to airports and are extensions of airports because they have actually internal streets and driveways that connect to airport runways. I have actually, thankfully, I have visited each and every one of the airports, including Zephyr Hills Municipal Airport, but many of these communities actually have their roads and their taxiways are one and the same. So they're accessory, the community is accessory to the airport. So they're exempted from that moratorium. So I just wanted to mention that. And I think I may be done, except that I do want to mention that we are working on airport zoning regulations. We do have an airport zoning commission that meets every month. The last meeting was on February 24th, I believe it was. February 24th, February 21st, sorry. And this was presented to them. And we meet every single month, and we are diligently working on airport zoning regulations. I just want the group to know. Additionally, I want to show this from 333.035 that basically says that, because something that may be mentioned is that this is the minimum we have to do. Well, that's not true. That's not, yes, it's true, it's the minimum, but we don't always have to do the minimum in everything that we do. We could do more, right? We could do more. We could protect the viability of airports that can still expand. Some of them are not going to expand. For example, Tampa North Aero Park cannot expand because they're basically physically bound by I-75 on the east and by Wesley Chapel Boulevard on the west. Hidden Lake, chances are they may not expand either. Zephyr Hills Municipal will be expanding. They actually have an airport master plan for expansion. Additionally, Pilot Country, I believe, does also have plans for expansion as well. So I'm just showing you this that basically says that it doesn't prohibit us from establishing that airport zoning regulations that are more restrictive than those that are prescribed in the section. So that's all I have for you. This is my funky little drawing, kind of.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely,
Denise,
David.
can you go back 2 slides? Runway protection zone. So, no, you went.
Oh, sorry.
That one. So, I just want to be clear because you made a statement that I'd like to clarify a little bit. You said basically nothing's allowed in the zones, but I assume if it was an agricultural use that wasn't subject to building permits, special exceptions, conditional uses, rezonings, that if somebody has an agricultural operation that's exempt from permitting, they can still have that there.
That's accurate.
Okay, so what's not allowed is something that would require a building permit from
That's
the
accurate.
county. But if it's some use that's exempt from permitting, that could still occur.
Yes, accurate. And I have to end this in that we're asking you to find the moratorium consistent with the Pasco County Comprehensive Plan and recommend approval to the Board of County Commissioners. This is, you're sitting as the LPA on this item. This is going to go for first reading on the 22nd of March, and for adoption on the 5th of April. And then, of course, for you to know that we are currently under pending ordinance moratorium, pending ordinance doctrine, sorry. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Denise. That was
Thank you.
Nice job there. All right, is there anybody here to speak on this other than
I have
Denise?
a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
So I just want to clarify, Denise. So I have a couple schools that are in, and I asked you this the other day, I just want to clarify. So I have a couple schools that fall within like the horizontal and or conical zones.
Yeah.
So if, a couple of those schools we're probably going to remodel in the next year or 2 years, I mean, probably if the moratorium doesn't get extended, then it's probably not an issue. But if the moratorium were to get extended, if I needed to,
But you
for
just told
some
me-
reason, submit a site plan, is that an issue, or?
So the word issue, I would never even use that as
Sure.
because you just told me that you're in the horizontal and the conical surface.
Yes.
So we are not, we don't, the major surfaces are the transition, the airport, the approach and the transitional surface. So the conical and horizontal surface, it's something that we just make sure that you're compliant with Part 77. And something I forgot to mention and just made me think of that. One of the things also in this moratorium, and it's something that we should be doing anyway, is that the airport zoning, the airport managers are going to be notified of the applications so that they can review and comment. So in your case, we would just send the application to the airport manager, review and comment, and just make sure that you comply with Part 77 in terms of height. I don't think that there's a building, you're not going to have a 200-foot building or anything like that. So, yeah.
Okay.
Okay?
So I could still move forward?
Yes.
If perchance.
You can move forward.
Yeah, okay.
The more problematic area for you is the noise contour areas. Because but you exist already. So there would be something written in for nonconformities.
Okay. Thank you.
So could I add one more clarification?
Sure.
To the best of my knowledge, we've never had a moratorium go longer than a year.
Okay.
So I don't recall one where we extended it longer than a year.
Okay.
Yes, again, and it's not the intent to make this go on for a long time. I do want to say that something that's been very, very positive throughout this process is that as you're writing a moratorium and you're creating all these exceptions, is that perhaps a lot of these exceptions and a lot of this language will become part of the actual airport zoning regulations.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that, I think it's important that we do what we can to protect these airports because, we lost an airport in West Pasco, and I think that was a mistake. I think every viable community tends to have a community airport, and I just think we need to protect the airports that we have, and I think it's important to do that now while we still can. We let it go a lot longer, and there won't be any reason to do it.
Right.
So, that's my feeling about it. So, thank you, Denise, for the job you did there.
Welcome.
I
think we had somebody who wanted to speak. Oh, Barbara, you wanted to speak?
Yes. I asked for extra time, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, you did.
Yes. Okay. Great. Thank you. Barbara Wilhite, 6327 Grand Boulevard. Before I start, if I could ask a question that I couldn't get it answered because of timing. I read, and this helps me in what I'm going to say. So when I read the conical and the horizontal surface under B, section B, 5B, it says in those surfaces that not only do you have to comply with 14 CFR Part 77, that's height, but uses may be conditioned so as not to be incompatible with airport operations, such as landfills, wildlife attractants, uses that cause visual obstructions such as glare, dust, light emission, smoke, steam, and fog. So to come here and say emphatically that in those areas all you gotta do is height, it's not the way it's written. Am I wrong?
No, can I make a comment because this actually, please forgive. This actually came up from a very good conversation that we had with one of the airport zoning managers. And he provided anecdotal evidence, which, you know, there was a building that was being built in the actual conical surface of an airport. And the building, the actual building it was all made up of glass. And it was these glass items that caused a huge amount of glare to airplanes that were, you know, landing into this airport. So basically, what had happened in this case is that the building was built, the glass panels were installed, everything happened, but it was causing glare. So there was a complaint about it. So what happened after the fact, this is after the fact sadly, they had to retrofit these glass panels so that they don't cause this glare. So if they put like this anti-glare item. So yes, that's a really good point, Barbara. You're correct. So not only we're going to look at height, I probably stopped and didn't read the whole thing. We're also going to look at all those other things and potentially condition it. That's correct. That's accurate.
So the answer is different than the answer you got, Mr. Williams. And that's what I'm worried about, right? So I don't stand here. I worked with these guys on the ordinance.
Absolutely.
I hired experts that did exhibits for them. I don't stand here unless I'm very concerned. I don't do that. And I'm disappointed that I'm here. But that all being said, I'm here. So, but the answer is that your site plan, if it's today, your site plan is going to go to the airport, they're going to comment, and then you have to figure out, you and your engineers, how to comply with dealing with wildlife attractants, which is a circular that's like 6 pages off the internet. You got to figure out what the heck that means. And staff's got to try to implement that. Obviously, some things are, you know what light emissions are, you know how to deal with lighting and those things. So there's some things that are kind of obvious how to deal with them, but some of these things are not obvious. And I couldn't get staff just to say these are the list. So there's no even direction to staff that this is the list of what you're worried about. And you, as an applicant, what you should be trying to figure out as you bring your applications forward. I couldn't get them to give that kind of certainty. It's all very open-ended. It doesn't need to be, but because we can protect the airports and we can do it together. You know, I stood here with Ridge Road and I said, I don't have any problem protecting the airports. I made sure that my rezoning protected the airports. I made sure everything was done. So, but I just want to back up for a second. We start with why we're here. So yes, the board had a 10-second conversation on that date at the end of the board meeting when everybody was packing up. Commissioner Marano said, hey, oh, by the way, I want to do an airport moratorium. Commissioner Fitzpatrick said, yeah, great idea. The others are putting their stuff together and said, yeah, okay. And they motioned, they did it. 10 seconds, no direction. But I want you to think of why that was. That wasn't because my clients, they're landowners with the school board that are doing something wrong. That's because the county staff, the county, I won't pick on staff, the county, because they have priorities, the county has never done airport zoning regulation. So start with that premise. We're putting this on our shoulders for a moratorium because the county itself hasn't done airport zoning regulation. So think about that. And you're not putting it on the adjacent landowners because they recommend that they're exempted, which is totally not correct. Because the only reason if they're recommending they're being exempted is because they're about to be treated differently than my clients. Because if not, you'd make everybody subject to it. So and my focus has been on Hidden Lake and Pilot Country. I don't know much about the other airports, full-time job keeping track of those 2 airports and these regulations. But so the very people that are adjacent to these airports are exempted. So if you're truly concerned about protecting the airports, just treat everybody the same. But if you're trying to treat people differently, then go with the exemption, exempting out the people that are actually adjacent. So backing that all up, I don't have any issue with the Florida statutes. Because the Florida, this wasn't in your presentation, but the Florida statutes, to go back, the Florida statutes require that you implement 2 types of regulations. One, you check height. And the second one is that you check land use compatibility based upon noise generation of the airports. It's 2 things. Pretty straightforward, except for I couldn't get them to write the language straightforward when it comes to height. In one area, it does refer to the tool, the FAA tool, which you can go to the website and you can use that tool to get your determination of no airspace navigation hazard or obstruction. But then we had to put language in here, but no, we got to go back and look at complying with Part 77, and we got to figure out if we're complying with Florida statutes. So I have a real problem with it not being really implementable. I send it to people to read, and they just gloss over, and they tell me, well, I didn't have time to read it. So, but I have read it. But if you want to do height check is fine. You should be doing that. My airport consultant says you actually should be doing that countywide. They've done it within less than that. And so forth. And so that's one thing the statute requires. The second thing is to look at land compatibility around airports based upon noise generation. So you're underway doing that. You've said, okay, we're going to do noise studies, and we're going to determine what's the compatible land use. Now, when we were doing the comp plan, we referred to that table that now is only apparently a guideline. And so I don't know if the comp plan was something that was that made available to these guys, the comp plan amendment, but in any event,
I did not attach it to the thing, but I can bring it up.
Well, so, but there, and that when we did that comp plan amendment, we were very specific. And I want to tell you something, that when we did the comp plan amendment, and I'm asking you just, what I'm going to ask you ultimately to do as the LPA is not go beyond the comp plan amendment. Because when we did the comp plan amendment, nobody objected, right? So a landowner represented, I represented them, airports represented, staff represented, you all didn't object, and the board didn't object. That was the balance. I don't know why we're not achieving that, staying at that same balance. If we just implemented what's in that, what was just adopted as a comp plan amendment, the ink is still fresh on it, as I mentioned in my correspondence to you. I don't know why we're not going beyond that. If we just implemented that, we'd have 100% consensus again. So based upon board direction in 10 seconds, for a moratorium because the county hasn't done anything, we are now proposing to go beyond a land use amendment that you guys recommended, staff drafted, you recommended, I agreed to, airport agreed to, and the board adopted. I don't understand why that is. And I'd ask if you give direction, because the board didn't give any direction, so this falls on you, because you're the first body to look at this. I think if you gave direction and said, let's deal with height and let's deal with noise. I think where we get into a real quagmire is when we go beyond that. The comp plan amendment specifically said, let's discourage uses that are wildlife attractants. So, but we've decided the county staff would like you all to venture out on trying to regulate wildlife attractants, and we're sending down a path of engineers and landowners and staff to try to figure out how to do that based upon some 6-page circular that you have to get off the internet, and you have to try to figure out what that says. I would say that one of the drafts, and my Ridge Road project, you all voted for it, and it's one of the drafts actually prohibited stormwater ponds, my stormwater pond, on that project. So when I see something, because a stormwater pond might be a wildlife attractant. So when I see that, and nothing's changed other than the language says such as and for examples and anything that's incompatible and refers to a 6-page circular, I can't tell my client that their stormwater pond may not be prohibited because there's enough discretion in that to do that. And I understand that staff can say, well, we're doing exceptions to a moratorium, but there shouldn't be a moratorium to start with, so don't lose sight of that, please. And I'm not trying to fight the moratorium because I believe these airports need to be protected, just like you all have said. I'm not trying to fight the moratorium, but if we can't make it fair and reasonable and balanced like that comp plan amendment was, then I ask you not to do it. But I think if we work together, and I thought we were, but we can't seem to get there, that we could get back to the point where we were balanced and we were protecting the airports, we were treating landowners reasonably, and we can get back to that point. There's some things that aren't said here. For example, that you can do these types of land use amendments. What they didn't tell you is that they're now precluding land use amendments with residential. Now, we heard about how you can do a noise study, and it could have a residential use, but the rezoning application in these noise event areas and my comp plan application can't have a residential component. So they're taking out the residential component even before you do the noise study. I don't know why, it's beyond the comp plan. The way you protect the airport is you do the noise study and you apply the table. Yes, it's a guidance table because the federal government can't tell you what to do. By the way, neither can the state statute tell you what to do. You don't even have to do this at all, but the state statute wants you to do it. There's no penalty for not doing it, but we should do it. We should protect our airports. So the table does give you the guidance once you do the noise contour study. It says if you're, for example, for residential, when you do the noise contour, which is based upon airport generation, if you're out of the 65 DBH, DBL, noise contour. The federal guidance is that residential is compatible use. And the board has found residential compatible use 2 times, both of my projects, adjacent, in the area of airports, because my projects aren't adjacent to them. Both those projects fell outside of the 65 dBH contour. But now, going beyond the statute, going beyond the comp plan, going beyond those projects, staff brings a presentation to you, doesn't really highlight it, but says, but now we're going to prohibit comp plan amendments and rezoning actions if you have a residential use. So that is just not acceptable. I don't think it's fair, reasonable to property owners. And so I appreciate what Denise is saying, and I think one of the big struggles is that this is now the precursor to the ordinance. So if this comes in like this, if I don't say anything, then this is the precursor to the ordinance. So this is what the framework of the ordinance is. We reframed the ordinance from state statute and the comp plan that was just adopted into something new. And now we're going into this whole other realm of trying to figure out what to do with stormwater ponds and wetlands because they attract wildlife. By the way, both of the projects, both of the surrounding areas to Hidden Lake and Pilot Country have stormwater ponds, have trees, have things that regulations wouldn't allow. And they're the closest to the airport, and they have those things. But now we are all burdened outside of that with trying to figure out what to do with ponds and wetlands and wildlife, but they're not. So with all of that, I will try to finish up here and say, look, what I'm asking you to do is protect the airport, treat the surrounding areas fairly, make this more simple to implement, because I challenge anybody to try to figure this out. I mean, even Denise was like, conical doesn't apply except for height. Well, no, it's got all this other stuff. So it's very, very, very cumbersome. I think if you stop this here and gave some direction, you're supposed to see if your job is it consistent with the comp plan? This goes beyond the comp plan. So direct that we follow the Florida statutes, we do the important things, height and noise, we implement the comp plan that's been adopted, and we do those things, and we do them well, and you'll have 100% support again, just like you had when the comp plan was done. We worked together to protect. I don't know how we've strayed off when the board gave no direction. But that's what I'm asking you to do. I've spent a gazillion hours at this. I'm committed to continue to do it. I don't want to fight the moratorium. I'm not really for any more moratoriums because at some point
Barbara, you're in the penalty box, you know that,
I know,
right?
that just says something about the county when you keep doing moratoriums. But I believe in it enough to protect the airports to stick in and say, we can get this done right. But the way it's being done is just not fair. And it's not reasonable. It's not striking the balance that it should. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else?
Hey, Chairman, I signed up to speak because I have projects that are affected by this.
You've been sworn, Jerry?
I have Jeremy Couch, Tampa Civil, 17937 Hunting Bush Circle. I'm a professional engineer, and I have 20 years experience in development. I've developed projects as the engineer immediately adjacent to MacDill, and I just CO'd an 8-story building right next to TIA. I'm very experienced with airports. In addition to that, I just brought this for you, and I'm trying to speak fast because I don't have a ton of time. This is a site plan I signed inside Pilot Country 3 weeks ago. This is a plan in Tampa Executive Airport I did recently. So I'm very familiar with all of the requirements to develop around an airport. I think that there are really 2 issues, like Ms. Wilhite said. It's noise and height. Height is the most obvious. That should be checked anytime you're in there. It's pretty simple. The ordinance doesn't have to be so long to require all these things. Get your FAA letter of no objection, or what it's called. It's pretty simple. You know, the noise ordinance, does anybody know why there's a noise zone? It's not to affect the pilots. It's because the airplanes are loud and the people that live around it complain. Like, that's what it's about. So You know, it used to be an issue back in the days when we had super thin windows, but I've done projects right next to MacDill recently. They land stealth bombers, like, not like little hobby airplanes. And just regular Florida building code windows meet those requirements now. But the way the ordinance is written, if you look at site plan, like, what if somebody is not in a master plan lot and they want to build a pool in their backyard and they're within the noise abatement area, which is like a quarter mile away from most of these airports? Do they have to hire an acoustical consultant? I mean, literally, that's what this says, and I don't see it any different. So I think it's going really far. I think it's going way too far. I had some important stuff to say, but.
You still got a minute.
Thank you. You know, I just want to put on the record because, you know, I have a project that is site plan bound that the BOCC approved like a couple months ago, really close to Hidden Lake. The noise area clips my project, I guess. Does that mean we can't develop the project now? Is that what was intended? I don't know. But I just want to talk about some of the compatible land uses, you know, within and near these airports. Pilot Country, Hidden Lakes, the folks that live there, they all have, I'm just going to go through a list, retention ponds, surface waters, fences, gates, roadways, parking lots, streetlights, large industrial buildings, residential buildings, buildings with windows, buildings with shingle roofs, buildings with wood components, Florida native trees and shrubs, above ground fuel tanks, swimming pools, detached garages, and buildings whose heights are in compliance with the FAA surface. So I just want to make sure that, you know, if staff has unilateral ability to review an application and determine whether or not something is a hazard, but they exempt these airports that have all these things, I think that needs to be really focused down into just, you know, are you going to build a garbage dump with a bunch of birds that, you know, that pilots are going to hit? I mean, those are the concerns. If you look at Tampa Aero Park, if you look at these maps, there is a rest area in the approach zone. Like, that thing is lit up like a Christmas tree. And I don't remember that like being an issue for any of those pilots. So I think this is really broad, and I would ask if you guys could narrow this up a little bit and take away some of the discretion that staff would have to review this, because they're definitely not experts. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right.
Can I just make one comment?
Terry, are you going to come up and speak? Yeah, of course.
I think we have some folks that want to speak on the other side of the aisle.
Well,
as
they can
well.
get up to speak. I just want to make one general comment, which I don't want to get into the details of what we're regulating or not regulating, but it's not uncommon for a moratorium. Remember, a moratorium ordinance is a temporary restriction. So it's not uncommon for the temporary restriction to be broader than what, I mean, I understand Barbara and Denise are saying it might be a precursor to the regulations, but there's a requirement that it be a precursor to the regulations. And so the board could logically say, we don't know exactly what we want to regulate yet, so we're going to make it fairly broad during this temporary time frame until we figure out some of these details. That's the whole point of a moratorium. I mean, arguably a moratorium doesn't have to have any exceptions. A moratorium could just say, we're not allowing anything in these areas. Now, staff has tried to carve out things that we know we don't want to prohibit, but I'm just trying to make sure you all understand, we're not talking about the actual regulations. And I could actually make an argument that a moratorium ordinance isn't a land development regulation that has to be consistent with the comp plan anyway. It's a temporary restriction on accepting applications while we develop the actual regulations. So I think a lot of statements have been made about as this ordinance as if it's the actual regulation. It's not detailed enough, it needs to do this, it needs to do that, it needs to. That's not what a moratorium ordinance normally does. Normally it's fairly broad. It says we're not accepting any of these things while we study this and figure out how we should regulate it. So I don't know that I accept this premise that every single detail, every single nuance of your regulation has to be in a moratorium ordinance. Now, if you don't want to do a moratorium ordinance, I guess that's one argument, that's one of Barbara's arguments. Now, you would all just wait for the actual regulations. But that's not what our board directed. Our board directed staff to do a moratorium ordinance. I'm only pointing out that that's not uncommon to have it be broader than what you actually end up with in terms of regulation. So I just want to make sure we're not losing sight of what this is. It's a temporary restriction, not the actual regulations. But that said, go ahead, Terry. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I would, Terry Pitos, Planning and Development. I was going to make a similar point to what Mr. Goldstein was just making. The second thing that I was going to say, though, is that from an economic development standpoint, the county has policies and we have advanced different types of projects that relate to certain types of land uses like Ldc and so forth. And so I think one of the exceptions that were built into the moratorium here, as you might say, an incentive perhaps, that we could work with developers or developments that would be wanting to locate around airports, as I think that would be a compatible type of use close to an airport. I think as the department would think that. So I just wanted to underline that economic development aspect of it, that we're carving out an incentive here, an exception to the moratorium to enable certain types of land uses that we would otherwise promote to locate within the county wherever possible, sufficing the other local land regulations that we have in the comprehensive plan in terms of making sure that they're compatible with residential flus or what have you around it. So that's the underlying thing that I just wanted to mention as well, that I agree with David that it can be a little broader, and I think the moratorium could be a blanket no, but I think there's a lot of options here still available for people to participate in development despite the application of the moratorium.
Thank you, Terry. I think we should have someone else who wants to speak. Come forward. Your name and address, please.
Joel Giartino from Pilot Country, 11626 Driver Lane, airplane owner, homeowner, occasional member of the board. It seems like in addition to having safety and noise issues, space and acoustic levels.
I'm sorry, you're going to have to face and speak right into the microphone.
I'm sorry. We also, it seems, have a short-term problem and a long-term problem. And I think you are particularly interested in the short-term problem of how we're going to get this particular development done. And we all, I think, are interested in the longer-term problems that will catch bad things that might happen if we weren't vigilant enough in regulating the activities or construction that would make the bad things happen. What I'm seeing right now, though, is that we might be able to look at this particular project in the light of all that we know from both sides of the fence, or multiple sides here, and make a judgment on it. That would be collaborative, I hope. Just saying.
All right. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Any questions from the dais?
I do want to mention, Planning Commission members, that you did receive a letter of support from the actual airport manager, airport owner of Pilot Country Airport, and you also received some letters additionally through email from some owners in Pilot Country as well. And we will share those with the clerk for the record.
All right, good.
You looking for the board now to speak?
Pardon me?
May I speak?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I lost out earlier this morning about jobs, so I would like to go back to jobs. When I read the documentation about the moratorium, and I need to get with Ms. Whitley, I don't need to get with her, I mean to speak to her for a minute. I got I made a motion to deny a project in the Hudson area, I believe, based on information that a pilot, an alleged pilot, said that would impact him flying and landing at an airport. And based on that information, that request was denied. It was finally approved. So what I'm trying to say is, I think in some ways this moratorium is beneficial to the community as a whole. I live right by one of the airports that was addressed today. And when I talked earlier, just a moment ago, about jobs, I recall a conversation with a person that landed, I think they were from Chicago or one of the northern states. And they were out to go play golf over at Saddlebrook. And that's jobs, that's income coming into the community. There's jobs at that airport. There's the pilot that landed the aircraft, there's mechanics, there's a restaurant there, there's food service there. And when I spoke to the staff the other day about this issue of the moratorium, like I said, I thought it was a good idea. It calls for a timeout, basically. I looked at this airport here in Zephyr Hills. I would like to see that someday turn into an airport where commercial landing comes in, like, I keep saying Value Jet. It's Allegiance. Value Jet is the one that crashed a number of years ago, many years ago. But anyway, I would like to see that happen, and I see that will occur, and I would like to see it, to be honest with you, in my lifetime. There are airports that do bring people in. I just gave you an example of the one that I live by in Wesley Chapel. It brings people in consistently, and some of those folks, like I said, I just gave you the one example there about the couple that went over to Saddlebrook to play golf. There are others that I've talked to, not recently, that go to Busch Gardens. Some fly in to go to Disneyland, but they come here for a reason. Super Bowl, things like that. The importance of airports for jobs is very important. And that's when I saw this particular moratorium go into play. It's a good idea. It's kind of time out. Let's look at it. Let's see what we can do to develop, again, this airport in Zephyr Hills. I keep going back to that one because I can see the growth there, the job potentials. And I'll leave it there. I think I've said enough about that. Again, if I go back, I can see the growth. I can see the timeout being good. I can see some of the airports, like the gentleman referred to, that are community airports, you know. There's an actor that lives up here in the Ocala area. He's got his own airport in his own community. And I don't have to tell you who that is. And if you don't know who it is, I'll tell you later on. But there are economic benefits to these airports. And I would hope that the county could do it right. And I think that's what Ms. Whitley was saying. Well, let's take the time out. Let's do it correctly. I know the gentleman talked about the buildings. I used to, when I had a real job, I used to have to fly in and out of San Diego occasionally. If you've ever flown into that airport, you'll know that you get the opportunity to fly between buildings and things like that. And yeah, the gentleman back there shaking his head, he knows what I'm talking about. What I'm trying to say is that this gives the community, this gives Pasco County a chance to do some economic growth that's positive. You know, that's all. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Pete.
Go ahead,
Jamie.
All right. I'm going to start out by saying I don't think there's anybody in this room that is going to argue against the need for protection and the importance of an airport to any community anywhere. Okay. Personally, I understand the whole purpose of the moratorium being a timeout. Personally, I'm a little fearful of the frequency that we're seeing moratoriums on all different kinds of developments around the county within the past 8 months to a year. I think they're just becoming more and more and more frequent. It seems like we see one every month. That being said, I'm not here saying I'm against this moratorium. However, I am fearful, or I hope that caution's given and taken in the development of the ordinance, because personally, even somebody that deals with this stuff every day, I think the way this is written in this moratorium is very complicated, and I'm concerned that a lot of this complication is going to carry over into the development of the ordinance. So, I mean, just that being said, and I think everybody wants to try to make it as simple as possible. I mean, to me, and I don't know probably a percent of what the people that are going to develop this ordinance know regarding ordinances themselves, but I mean, there are ordinances in place that I believe is where we're trying to head for the surrounding communities in Hernando County, for the city of Zephyr Hills. I think there's good baselines to help develop these and to regulate the things that need to be developed and included in those regulations to protect what we're trying to protect. But I don't think it's in anybody's best interest to try to somehow put on an already overwhelmed development review staff the regulation against wildlife attractants and how engineers design stormwater ponds within any of these areas because they might be a wildlife attractant. I think that's a whole, I mean, I think that opens a can of worms that you're just going down. There's already regulations out there for that. I mean, I just think it's a very dangerous precedent if we incorporate that into the ordinance. So that's my position.
Mr. Chair, I agree with everything that Jamie just said. He actually stole a lot of my thunder, so, but the one point is I'm just wondering, and protection of airports is hugely critical. They're economic drivers, there's no doubt with that, but I guess the simple question is, if we were to comply with the intent of Florida statutes, would we need a moratorium? I understand that the noise contours need to be done, so if we're looking at the two specific aspects that we need to kind of comply with the intent of the Florida statutes, is there a need for a moratorium? Because I don't disagree that, you know, Jamie and I, we talk to people in the industry and developers and the like, and there is a lot of moratorium kind of, what do you refer to it as? What was pandemic, you know, whatever. There's a lot of sensitivity to that in the developer community, so I don't want a negative impact to Pasco, and you know, we're growing at such a clip and we want to continue that forward. So it's a simple question, but I'm just wondering if we were to kind of follow the intent of Florida statutes, do we need to go to the full effect of a moratorium, or could that be done otherwise?
Well, I think it's really not a question for staff. It's been a direction that the county commissioners have given the staff to do. So they're just following the direction of county commission. And I think that, you know, I think one of the most cogent points that was made today was made by David, which is to say, take a little time out, we understand that some of these things shouldn't be in there, like, you know, wildlife attractions and things like that. Those are some of those things are, you know, it will interfere with other regulations that we already have. But give us some time. Barbara, for example, I know had considerable involvement in the development of this regulation. And I think she should still have it. Jeremy, same thing with his knowledge. I mean, these people can bring, you know, good ideas to bear so that we can form, you know, a good and workable regulation rather than just accept whatever the state happened to throw out or something that, you know, the staff comes up with that they really don't have the knowledge and skill to develop it, doing the best they can with what they know. And so let's take a little time and do it the right way. We've got plenty of people that can contribute information to it and suggestions, and some of them are in this room. And so none of us want to step on the throat of good job creating development, and that's been in process here in Pasco County, and I think we can do that. This is not a county-wide moratorium like some things are. This is very specific to be around airports.
But to answer your question about the necessity, I think the primary driver was that the county has not completed its noise study.
Okay.
And so it's impossible to just, if staff wanted to just adopt the regulations today, they couldn't do that without the noise study.
Right.
So that's hampering their ability to just go out and adopt the regulations.
But from what I hear from that sounds like that's a 45-day pause while the noise is done. So maybe that's a 90-day pause versus I guess I'm trying to, you know, I'm concerned about that, and I'm also concerned about.
What is the duration we're recommending for this moratorium?
180 days.
But we could adopt the regulation sooner than that, right?
We absolutely could.
Okay. Yeah, and I guess my other comment would echo what Jamie said. I just don't want to see this get too complicated, because I read it and it, like, I think Barb made the comment that, I kind of gloss over. I think it's absolutely needed, and obviously we need to have it because we're not in compliance with Florida statutes right now. I just don't want to make it too complicated.
Yeah, if I understand correctly, the exceptions are provided here to, without the exceptions, you would take the big rectangular area, the 20,000 square, or 20,000 feet from all the airports and lay that on a map and say anything in there you couldn't do anything with, right?
Right.
If it was a straight moratorium, and that's not what's being done here. There's exceptions provided here that.
I don't know that we would have that's pretty radical.
Yeah,
I don't know that we
right.
would. I think that we would say, you know what, part 77 surfaces.
Okay.
I'm just saying, you know. Is it the 20,000 feet thing? That's in state statute.
Right.
We're required to do that, and I do that all the time, every time I get a cell tower, because I can't think of anything that's that tall that comes in those areas. And I get a no obstruction to air navigation from the FAA letter all the time, so.
So it may not be the smaller, what's one of the smaller areas you said?
It would be the part 77 surface
Right,
area,
so
or,
that area, to answer your question, yes, we could just say no applications whatsoever in that area. But I think as staff is trying to say, well, there are certain things that we don't want to stop completely while we're studying this. But again, this isn't the actual regulation. I actually agree.
Yeah.
They may have some valid points about that there's better ways to regulate some of these things, but I guess the question is, at some point, you just need to do the regulation. If you delay the moratorium too long, there's no point in doing the moratorium.
Right.
It really is just supposed to be a temporary pause while you do the regulation.
We could, our advice could be to make the moratorium a shorter duration, 120 days instead of 180, for example.
And I don't know, does that give you enough time, Denise? I have no idea.
all it does is it puts more fire under my tush to move faster.
Well, okay, but
That's all it does.
How long is it taking the consultant to do the study?
So we did have a kickoff meeting with the consultant. It was last week. And the consultant told us that it would take them 45 days. Now, 45 days beginning when, I don't know, but they already have the signed order to proceed and everything else. I just wanted to be clear that this is just information that's gonna be plugged into a computer. This is not, they're not gonna
Yeah, but I mean,
go to the location or anything like that. So 45 days is what we're being told.
And I think you're gonna need to assume at least 2 or 3 months after that to get, I mean, especially if you're gonna get stakeholder input.
That's correct.
Which I'm hearing that planning commission wants stakeholder input, so I don't see that being done quicker than 2 to 3 months. And that's probably aggressive.
So 6 months is probably reasonable.
Yeah, I don't think you can get through it any faster than 180 days. I mean, I think that's pretty aggressive.
I think I've surprised you in the past, and I will tell you that sitting on the Airport Zoning Commission, we actually, but for this last time we had at our meeting, we are actually writing the code together with the Airport Zoning Commission. So, and actually Barbara attends those meetings, so she sees what we do.
I mean, even a very simple glitch amendment takes us
2
to 3 months. I mean, I would be shocked if they can do this shorter than 180 days, I'll be honest with you.
I will tell you, I will try the best I possibly can. It's my intention.
If anybody can do it, it's Denise.
She surprises me all the time. All right, any more comments? All right. Have a motion?
I'll make the motion to approve this moratorium.
Okay.
Can I make a clarification that that's with the changes that were sent this morning to the Planning Commission, please?
With changes.
Thank you.
Okay. Do I have a second? Anybody here?
You realize that it's an issue seconding motions today.
I mean, I'll second the motion, but I mean, again, I really think, I mean, just stakeholder input's needed. I'm scared to death of the ordinance.
Well, it still has to pass, you know.
I understand.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the motion? Hope not. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, signify by the same sign. Motion carries.
I have one last thing.
No,
Okay.
Sorry.
no way.
Please forgive. So it has to do with technological stuff that you might be receiving from our information technology department. So our IT people, and Craig could probably come up here and tell you this whole thing because I'm going to sound very caveman. So they are basically creating the requirement for you to have, so for there to be some additional security. So there's kind of like something called duo security. So they have to verify your identity for you to get into your tablet or your iPad. So I want to make sure that you're doing that. That's probably going to be within the next few days. You're going to be receiving that. And if you have any questions, you could reach out to me and I will get you in contact with IT. I've done that before with other planning commission members. It's just like a second layer of security so that they know that the person that's going into the iPad is actually Jamie Girardi and not, you know, the King of Nigeria or whatever, or someone else.
Yeah, I've seen
So,
him get in there a couple of times.
So anyway, so I just wanted to let you guys know that you're probably going to be getting something from IT stating that you have to follow these prompts to get that duo set up. And just, that was it. Thank you. Thank you so much for.
I already use it and it's fairly easy. They send you a text to your phone, basically.
Right.
If we're already set up with that, we don't need to worry about it, or is this an additional? Because I've already got the duo.
You already have it?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you have it, you probably got it set up a while ago or whatever. But they're kind of like what Pasco is doing, they're pushing, they're calling it Pasco 365, which is Windows 365. So some of you, I think there's 3 of you that are expected to receive that within the next few days. So just wanted to let you know.
Okay.
It's just an authentication, an additional authentication. You see that more and more nowadays.
Yes.
If you like submit for a passport and stuff like that, they're,
Medical.
yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise, and good job on your hard work. Sorry we're making it harder.
So Denise, is this coincidence that all of our Dade City meetings seem long and our Newport Richey meetings seem
Yeah,
short?
what's up with that?
Oh, we have a long one next time in Newport Richey? Okay.
Well,
Oh,
yes,
come
because
on.
it will be Newport Corners, right? But I will say that one of the items that could have been a very long meeting is actually being continued for 60 days, which is the Loman Links Golf Course, the Beacon Woods, the appeal of a determination. So that could have made your meeting even longer, but that's the attorney has asked for a continuance, so.
So bring dinner? Is that what you're saying?
Bring a light snack, and I don't know if it would be that bad. It's just gonna be Newport Corners? Okay, so
We
yeah,
should have
no,
known
bring,
this was gonna be a long one when we got the guava and cream cheese pastries.
which, by the way, there's still some, please.
Yeah.
Those were made by Jessica, so that
Thank you,
was.
Jessica. Is she still here?
Thank you.
I'll take a sugar.
We have a motion to.
Motion to adjourn?
Yeah, oh yeah, motion to adjourn. We're all done.